Meeting of the Zoning Hearing Board to hear the appeal of 3210, the appeal of Villanova University. Would you all stand and pledge allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just come up and say good. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to dispense with reading the entire application. As I said previously, it's Appeal 3210. The applicant is Villanova University, and this is a special meeting that was convened because it was believed that this hearing would take a longer period of time than one normally does, especially we have a packed schedule on our regular Thursday hearings. So, Counselor?
Yes, Nick Cornelia, representing Villanova University. And if we can have projection. Thank you. So this is the application of Villanova to construct a welcome center for its admissions office, as well as a university center. University center used to be like a bookstore, but obviously there's not a whole lot of books anymore, but it's still called a university center, and it acts like the bookstore would on a regular campus. You'll see where it's located. It's located on St. Thomas Way, right by the bridge that crosses over to where the church is located. A3, and we'll have several witnesses will testify, but you can see on A3 Villanova's campus, and Lancaster Avenue running down the middle. St. Thomas Way is where that arrow is located on that plan. What you have there, it is next, immediately adjacent to the CICD and the planned institutional land of Villanova. And then there's a CO strip running basically from St. Thomas Way down to Aldwin Lane, Sproul Road. Across the street is Villanova's main campus. You see the church located there. Obviously classrooms, dormitories, things of that nature. Across those railroad tracks, the Amtrak tracks, is the law school. And then across Sproul Road from the law school is what they call as West Campus. Also, along Lancaster Avenue, as I mentioned, you have a planned institutional strip with the CICD that also has the Performing Arts Center. That is separated from the neighbors on Aldwin by a heavy buffer strip, as well as the railroad tracks. As I mentioned, if we can flip to one of the plans, this is a close-up of the area. So the building will span what you see there as St. Thomas Way. Two of the buildings, or three of the buildings, would be removed. Moriarty, which is currently a dormitory, is a non-conforming use in the CO district. And then two other buildings would be removed. The two buildings further down from there will be removed and replaced with parking. Looking at the building again, you'll see how it spans St. Thomas Way. It's close to the bridge. We'll have testimony as to the purpose of the building, which is for admissions and for the bookstore, as well as testimony from both the architect and the engineer. There's a couple items of relief being requested. One item of relief not being requested is in the PI, the Plan Institutional. We would have to go to the Board of Commissioners for a conditional use hearing. We're not asking for relief in anything in the PI this evening. That would be a separate application, wouldn't come to the Zoning Hearing Board, would go to the Board of Commissioners for conditional use approval. What we're talking about this evening is that portion of the building that would be in the CO. That is the commercial office building district. And currently, as we mentioned, there's a non-conforming use there. We are replacing one nonconforming institutional use with another nonconforming institutional use, and we're also requesting a special exception to expand that by no more than 50%. And both of those requirements are special exception requirements. So for the first witness, I would call Matt Harris, but before we start there, let me just hand up some additional exhibits. These are additional exhibits. They're not, you already have, I believe, A1 through A16. John, I have the full copy. If we want to make the full copy of the traffic report, I don't know if you have it in there, in the exhibits or not. I know, remember, I submitted the summary, then I submitted the full copy by PDF, and then I did submit 10 full copies of the traffic report. But here's one, at least for the record.
Yes, I think
There's
we
the
should
full
have-
copy, if I can hand that up.
Yes. It's, does it have an exhibit number on it?
I'm just replacing A16.
Oh, I got it. So this is the full A16 traffic report. I got it.
The previous A16 is some.
Okay,
I
got
also have some additional exhibits.
Thank you. That's for the record. I have it right here, yeah. Okay. You see, you've handed up A17 through 24.
Why don't you stay here because Matt's going to refer to different slides. Matt?
Here. Thank you. I do. Matthew, M-A-T-T-H-E-W, Harris, H-A-R-R-I-S.
Matt, by whom are you employed?
Villanova University.
And what's your position with Villanova?
I'm the Executive Director of Undergraduate Admission.
And how long have you been in that position?
I've been in this current position a little under a year,
And how long have you been employed by Villanova University?
approximately 15 years, and prior to this, for about 10 years, oversaw our visit experience.
What
I oversaw our campus visit experience for the admission office.
are your duties as Director of Admissions?
So really oversee the entire admission process for the undergraduate and for Villanova, our visits, our applications, the review of that, and ultimately the enrollment of our incoming first-year class.
I'm going to call your attention to Moriarty Hall. And how is Moriarty Hall currently used?
Yeah, Moriarty is a residence hall on our campus. We have approximately 48 beds there, and it's been in that use for many decades, since about 1963, I believe.
And for the board, Mr. Rice and I have stipulated that this is a legal nonconforming use. After conferring with Mr. Kachansky, I believe that is stipulated too.
Correct.
So the students who live in Moriarty, there are students at Villanova University?
Yes, they are.
And where are there other activities, campus activities performed?
For the students in that residence
Yes.
hall? Really in all of the areas of campus that surround this location. So, dining, classes, everything are all kind of part of this continuous campus piece right across the bridge there.
Okay, if I can refer to A3, which is the aerial of campus, and you heard me do a brief description of the surrounding area. Could you go through and describe what we're showing here on A3?
Sure, yeah. So this really is a good aerial of nearly the entirety of our main campus in that location. And so really spanning from residence halls and the soccer field at the north through the main piece of campus in the middle where a lot of our classes are, some residence halls, some dining facilities, church, other things there, continuing south of the road where there's, residence halls, dining area, parking for some things we use there, and continuing down into our south campus, which has primarily residential.
And then across the street?
And then across the street, across Ithan, is primarily athletic facilities to the north of Lancaster, and our Performing Arts Center, parking, and athletic fields to the south.
And to the north of Lancaster, across from the CICD and the CO zoned area.
Right
That's
above
main
Moriarty? Yeah, so right in the kind of current main campus area is really a mix of all of our institutional uses there: offices, residence halls, classrooms, dining facilities, library, student center, and similar things like that.
And how do students or even guests transverse Lancaster Avenue?
Yeah, as we welcome guests to come visit us in admissions, they will park in those lots right there at the bridge. We'll encourage them to cross the bridge, take a ride at the church, and head to our offices in Austin Hall, which is just kind of to the right of the main church.
Okay, show you what's been marked as A3A. And what does this represent?
Yeah, so this really represents currently for us the area where our admission visitors will come and park to start their visit experience on campus.
And they park in this area here?
They do. So they will park in that area and then proceed kind of to the steps to the bridge or the elevator and head over to begin that visit.
And how do they enter this area here?
Yeah, I think people seem to come from every which way, but I think come in that first driveway or the second driveway, either to those spaces. In our instructions to our visitors, we encourage them to come in the St. Thomas Way entrance.
Okay, and that's the driveway, yeah, right as the pointer is showing right there. And then how about the driveway to the west of that?
Yeah, so that's the one that I think is really the most natural one, as you would see, with that turn with the retaining wall there that really kind of directs you right in for the visit. And so the majority of our visitors that are driving are typically coming from the highway, and so would come that direction and make really one of the quickest turns into campus, into that entrance, and then park in those kind of 4 different lot areas as they would approach.
So this entire area that we're looking at here on A3A, which includes the CO and the PI, is mostly parking area.
Yeah, mostly parking area. There's those couple other buildings that are there, but in terms of the admission piece and use, this is really currently our primary parking area for any of our admission visitors.
And the people who park here have access to entire campus?
They do, yeah. And so really the nice thing is they park there. They can walk on foot over to the main piece, and then our visit will really depart from there. And so typically the admission piece is really able to be handled with that one area. The only exception would be any people visiting that may have ADA accommodations, and we'll encourage them to continue through the light at Ithan to main campus to where they can park closer to where our offices are in the middle of the main campus.
And this driveway here, where the pointer is, that goes all the way through to the CICD?
It does, yes.
And actually goes all the way through to Ithan Avenue as well, correct?
It does. Mm-hmm.
And into the parking structure there on Ithan Avenue?
It does. It would cross Ithan, and then there's an entrance to the garage right there.
And Moriarty Hall, that is being removed for part of this, correct?
Yes, that would be removed for this.
And then there's 2 other halls to a little bit to the west, and their names are?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot on those.
I put you on the spot on that one, but I'm trying to see. Garrity
and Griffin halls, yeah. So those would both be removed. Those are currently serving as offices, and those would both be removed as part of this.
And we see that will be parking area too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, currently, tours on campus, how are they conducted?
Yeah, it is really a mission-critical thing for what we do at Villanova, and so we'll encourage people, they'll come by our office to check in for that tour. Currently, we don't have a space that is able to accommodate the people that are coming for each of those visits, and so we'll kind of quickly lead them off to a different space on campus, utilizing, various classrooms and auditoriums and lecture halls that are available throughout the day for that visit, depending on, what we're able to accommodate at that time. Sometimes we're splitting the group up into a couple different spots, and from that then they'll be taken on a student-led campus tour following that the information session.
And when we say a tour, what type of people are we talking about going on these tours?
Yeah, so these are really prospective students looking at Villanova, just the undergraduate piece of things. Graduate students are really not typically visiting as much, and so it is normally a student along with a parent, a guardian, or 2, and so they do typically arrive as a group, which is nice, and so they'll travel fill in together.
Okay, so they park in this area here that we're showing. Would anything change as far as parking with the new building?
No, I think that's a nice thing. You know, our instructions have nicely been this for many years. They'd really stay the same. We also really try our best to encourage families to take public transportation too. And so I know we have some that stay in the city and will take, in particular, the Paoli-Thorndale line to that station. And this is an easy walk from there. But then also the other station is right in this location as well too.
So they would enter the main portion of campus through that pedestrian bridge?
Yes.
And where would they go from there?
Yeah, so as they cross the pedestrian bridge, kind of the church is right ahead, if you picture that, and then just to the right, 2 buildings over. The admission office, we're currently in the basement level of a residence hall. We've been there at least 30 years. And so our space holds maybe 20 people in kind of that main lobby area and is just very subpar for, you know, the place that Villanova hopes to be and the students that we want to attract and the space that we're hoping to show what a tremendous place Villanova is. And so it is a struggle to us as a first impression of a space to welcome them into.
Where's the current location of the bookstore? Remember, it was at Kennedy in the middle of campus.
Yeah, so it's currently located in St. Mary's Hall, which is, as we described on that map, kind of on the northern quadrant there. You can see it marked on the map. So it is right near the intersection of County Line Road and Spring Mill Road.
So that would be located in this area as well?
Yes, so the university shop would come into the same location as where we are, which I think has some benefits. You know, we really see a lot of our visitors that hopefully enjoy their visit and are wanting to grab some merchandise on the way out. And so, you know, the way it currently is now, as much as we are encouraging them to walk over that direction, we do see people that will move their car currently over to that other space. And so, you know, we would be anticipating that the nice thing is they'd be able to park a single time and then really have the entirety of their visit at Villanova be done on foot after that point.
Now, is the purpose of this to attract more visitors?
Yeah, no, you know, no, it's not. We actually we were looking at some numbers kind of ahead of this, and, you know, over the last 9 years or so, we've been very fortunate. We've increased about 9,000 applications in that time, but we've actually seen less visitors in that time. And so I think there are really trends that are happening, that more people are visiting us virtually. People are maybe waiting until they see if they get in or not before they visit. And so overall, throughout the course of the year, our number of visitors is actually slightly decreased. And so this is really not an effort to accommodate more people. It's that the way that we're currently accommodating them is not a great representation of Villanova, and we think this would be a much better way to show the tremendous place that we want to show that it is.
What's the timing of the tours?
Yeah, you know, so we actually have the majority of our visitors are coming from outside the township, outside the Commonwealth. I believe last year about 80% of our visitors were coming from out of state, and so it is really kind of nice. They're coming from everywhere, and we get to show off our area. And so we purposely, though, are not timing them during rush hour. We want it to be a positive experience for them. And so our morning visits, the days that we have an information session, they begin at 10:15, and then tours are at 10:45. In the afternoon, we do them at 2:15 and 2:45. And so we really, for their sake, are trying to avoid traffic challenges. And so we really kind of push them more towards the middle of the day.
And what do you see happens after the people go on the tour? How do they normally get to the bookstore then on the western part of campus?
Yeah, you know, I think we definitely encourage some to walk. We've got great QR code, like maps and everything to go. But, you know, we have seen as that is a little bit further, and then many are leaving after that they seem to get in their cars and drive through that intersection and over and repark in that spot currently. So I think it would potentially, with this consolidation, really bring an improvement actually to the number of car trips that we have from our visitors.
As to what will the admissions office contain, and what will be the setup of it?
Yeah, so really, as people come in, we check them in, we welcome them. We have a nice lobby space for them to wait, and then a key piece of the visit for us is really just welcoming them and doing an information and question and answer session. And so we do have a kind of a large meeting room. I would say it almost is more like a lecture room where we'll do a presentation and speak to that group, take questions and answers, and then from that space, they'll go kind of up through the building by design and head straight onto that bridge to begin the tour. So the tour would actually begin in the building, and then they would be led up onto the bridge and then take the bridge across the street to begin the student-led walking tour.
Now, that meeting room, is that crucial for the admissions program?
It really is, and that's actually one of the largest challenges we're having right now, that, as people are coming to visit, while our students are great representatives of us, they're making a major financial investment in Villanova, and so they want to hear from people that work there and can answer their questions and speak to what's happening. And so having that information session led by a member of our team is something that is critical to the visit. And so that's something that we're having to kind of shoehorn into a lot of places right now, but this would allow us to really provide a much more premier welcome and proper experience that many of our peer institutions are currently doing.
Would that meeting room be limited in nature as to how it's used?
It would be, yeah. So it would really be in the admission office and in our purview, and it would really be used for these information sessions with our visitors.
You're not looking to have speakers there or concerts or anything?
No. So I would liken it more to a lecture hall than an auditorium, because there will be no back of house space. There will be no, curtains and anything like that. It will be much more an area to give a presentation to visitors as really its primary use.
And why is this location so desirable?
Yeah, it's really great for us because, thankfully the bridge we've had is such a great landmark, as is the church on the hill, to kind of direct people in. That has been so easy for them to find that parking area, more so than whenever we've used anywhere else on campus. And so with it being located directly next to that area, it really is the easiest spot to find coming off the highway. And really, I think just visually stunning as well, too, as you look out the Welcome Center and have that beautiful view of campus up on the hill, I think is really our best foot forward from that location.
How about hours of operation?
Yeah,
When
so
do you see it being open?
So, where the tour experience is really kind of more in that 10:15 to 11:45 window in the morning, 2:15 to 3:45 in the afternoon. The actual office would have normal business hours of a 9 to 5 window, but we really don't do anything outside those hours. And really, it's a Monday to Friday program that we're running from there.
And how about the number of visitors who visit campus? Do you anticipate an increase, even if there's an increase in enrollment? Do you anticipate more visitors, or what do you anticipate?
Yeah, I don't think so. Looking back, again, I mentioned a bit ago, the last 8 or 9 years or so, our number has stayed consistent or dropped really during that time. And we've had a lot of things happen at Villanova in that time. I mentioned we went up almost 10,000 applications. We had a couple national championships in basketball, and there really wasn't ever a surge during that time that changed this path, I guess. And so it really has been very consistent, the number of people that come to visit us. And so we're not looking to grow that number. We're looking more to provide a much higher experience to those who are coming to really try to show the impressiveness that we want to show.
Okay, thank you. John?
Thank you.
Matt, hi.
Hi.
I'm John Rice. Your last name, I didn't catch your last
Yes, Matt Harris.
name. Harris. I'll speak into it. So, Matt, you testified that you work in the admissions office, and how long have you been there?
Approximately 15 years.
15 years, okay. All right. And you've been actively involved in the Welcome Center project and the layout and the needs since this has been developed?
Yes, I have been. And for context, I'm newly in the role of executive director, but for approximately 10 years prior to that, I oversaw the entire admission visit experience that would include these daily visits and tours, including all the scheduling, the timing, directions, and communication out to families. So about over a decade directly involved with what we're talking about.
And currently, the admissions office is where?
We're located in Austin Hall, which is in the center of main campus. It's about a 102-year-old residence hall. We're in a space that long ago was the library, then was the student center for a bit, but is a basement-level lobby space.
You're in the basement? Villanova has you in the basement?
They do have me in the basement, yep.
It's hard to believe. So will you be moving over to the Welcome Center?
We will. Our offices will move with this. So
all the admissions?
yes, so it is kind of the entire undergraduate admission office will move as this experience.
And how many employees are currently in the admissions office?
Yeah, there are approximately 26 employees in the admission office.
Does that include you?
That does. It's 26 or 27.
And they're all full-time employees?
They are all full-time employees, but to note, 3 of them are currently regionally based. And so I should clarify that in the actual physical office, there would be 3 fewer, so 24.
Okay. So the 3 regional employees are out and about, but they visit occasionally?
They will visit a few times a year, but they are primarily based in other parts of the country.
Okay. And you said the hours of operation generally for the tours are 10:15 to 11:45. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, so the morning tour would be a 10:15 to 10:45 information session, and then a 10:45 to 11:45 tour.
And is that the same schedule that's going to be maintained at the new facility?
That's our plan. We've done that for many years. We sometimes make slight tweaks by about 15 minutes based on the class schedule, just because our tour guides have to do it between their classes. But that is really the window we've had ever since I've been involved with the program.
So to go on a tour, I have to make an appointment ahead of time?
You do.
For one of the days and one of the windows that's open? And what months are we talking about that these tours occur?
Yeah, great question. And we do have everyone pre-register, and it's really our way of controlling numbers. And so we typically open them a few months ahead of when the event will take place. We offer them throughout the entire calendar year. We take some breaks, around, holidays and things like that. And we do see the larger demand to visit typically be in the kind of spring, summer, and early fall months. And over the winter time, we see, just because of the cycle of the admission process, the demand drop quite a bit during those times of the year.
Okay. And I think you testified that Villanova receives 9,000 applications?
No, I apologize. There was about a 9,000 jump in that time. So this year we received about 26,300 applications.
26,300. And how many get accepted?
This year we're just still closing the door on it, but it was about 27% of that group.
So 26,000 applications, how many come for a tour?
Yeah, as I was kind of looking through those numbers, it's less than half typically, which is crazy to me that, they are applying without kind of seeing sight in hand, I guess. Maybe I'm on the older end now and people have a different way of exploring things, but we really, in particular following COVID, have seen that a lot of students will have their first look be via some of our virtual presentations. And that's why the spring months are sometimes a little more of interest to come, that they're waiting until their decisions have been released. And so, that's something that typically I think is helping to control how that number hasn't changed a whole lot, even though more are applying.
Okay. And so you're in Austin Hall.
Yes.
And is there anybody else other than admissions in there? Just your staff?
And then the residence hall that's above us.
There's residents above it?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So what's going to happen to your space once you move out of Austin Hall?
I'm not sure that has been, I'm not sure we've really talked about that. She'll know.
You could just say you
I don't know. I don't know.
Primary location.
Okay. And, well, I have another question. The bookstore's in St. Mary's Hall. So if that moves, what's going to happen to St. Mary's Hall? Do you know?
I don't know also, so that'd be a good
Okay.
question for her.
All right. We'll defer that. So on the parcel that, let me see. Could we put that map back up that was? Yes. Okay. So Matt, on this parcel, you talked about how people arrive into the parking lot currently. They park in one of these lots, and then they go across the bridge and they come to the admissions office currently.
Yes.
Okay. So is there going to be any changes to the exits and entry driveways coming into the site with the new Welcome Center?
There's probably others better to speak on that, but as far as I know, no.
Okay. So, because when I look at this, there's no way to make a left, it's tough to make a left turn into here if I'm coming west on Lancaster Avenue. Like, there's no left turn lanes coming in here, correct?
I believe there is one right as you're coming under the bridge there, it looks like, but I might be
St. Thomas, yeah, it's hard to see it.
onto St. I know there's a traffic light at St. Thomas Way, though.
Right, okay. Well, I'll ask somebody else, one of the engineers. So, we have Moriarty Hall, which you testified about. That's currently a dorm for how many students?
I believe there's 48 beds that are in that building.
Okay, is there anything else in there?
46?
46.
46.
Close enough. So there's 46 beds. Is there any other offices in there or anything else?
No, there's, I believe, a lounge space for the students that live in that building.
Okay. And there's Garrity Hall, I think is the next one as we go west. And what's currently occurring in Garrity Hall?
That is office space currently.
And that's for Villanova's
That is
activities?
completely internal Villanova offices.
Okay. How many employees are there? Do you know?
I don't know that answer. I apologize.
Okay.
I think others might.
And then Griffin Hall is the next one. Also office space?
Also offices, yes.
Number of employees, any idea?
I don't know either, sorry.
So if I go west and I keep going west, I'm going to hit another driveway and hit, a right turn in, right turn out driveway. And there's a building to the west of that. What building is that?
Is that Stone? Farrell Hall? Farrell Hall.
Farrell Hall.
Farrell Hall?
If you don't know, just say you don't
Thank
know. You can't, phone a friend for your testimony. Just say you don't know. Ask
I don't know.
somebody else later.
Thank you.
But Farrell Hall is a dormitory, I take it, right?
No, that is another office.
That's offices.
Mhm.
Okay. The, I don't know, could I? Let me ask him to look at, this is your exhibit, Nick?
Yeah.
I'm going to show the witness exhibit A19. Can we put it?
You got it.
Oops.
You have it.
No, it's sorry, it's not different. Yep.
There it is.
Well, let's start with the first page. A19 is a two-page exhibit by Stern Architects. It's essentially the floor plan, first floor, and the second floor plan. So, Mr. Harris, let me ask you about the first floor plan. You're familiar with this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And
Oh, would you prefer?
okay,
I can see it on the screen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
on the plan, let me start on the east side of the plan. It says university, shop, cafe, and there's some storage and loading areas. What's your understanding as to what will occur in those spaces there?
So that would be the university shop space, and then, as you noted, a small cafe
Okay. On the first floor?
on the first floor, yes.
No offices over there, is that right?
I don't believe so. I don't know.
Okay. Can we go to the second floor? I just want to stay on the east side of St. Thomas Way. Okay, this is the second floor of the proposed building. And the blue areas, that's all the office space there?
That would be part of the undergraduate admission office space, right there.
Okay, so that's where you and your staff would go to that space there?
Some of our team. So we would be located in 2 different locations in the building.
Do you know how many employees will be utilizing the office space there?
I believe it's around, there are a couple extra in there for potential future growth of just in the spaces built into it potentially. So I believe currently there'd be around 15 that would be in that area.
Okay. So you currently have 26 or 27 employees. Only 15 are going to move to these offices?
And then 3, remember, are not located on campus. And then the remaining 10 or so would be in a different location of the building.
Different locations, okay. Okay. The cafe, let's go back to if we can go back to the first floor. The cafe, could you describe what that's intended to be?
From what I've been told, it really similar to our Holy Grounds concepts on campus, just an internal little coffee shop area for people that are already in the bookstore.
Okay. So it's going to be open to the public, but it's going to be people that are visiting the bookstore, is that right?
Really, yeah. The people who are already in the bookstore space, I think, would be the ones most natural to go in there.
Okay. So on the west side of St. Thomas Way, we have on the first floor an auditorium of 300 seats. And what is that intended to be used for? I think you said it was going to be not a stage, but something lesser than that. Could you?
Yeah, if I could walk you through how you'd arrive. So where that red arrow is where you would walk in. And then as you kind of continue down that hallway, the majority of visitors would stop kind of right at that vestibule in the middle. And that is where they would be greeted by members of our team who would welcome them to campus, provide them with additional information. Depending on how early they arrived, there's lobby space to the north of that they would be able to wait. Which we have now in our current area, but this would just be a little bit of a more comfortable, nicer space. And then the lecture meeting space, auditorium as labeled there, would be where we would conduct our admission information session for those visitors. And so they would kind of trickle in as they're arriving. We would get them seated in there, provide admission information about Villanova, about the application process, and then we would bring their tour guides into that space, do Q&A, and then kind of pair them up with their tour guides who would then take them out on tour.
So the auditorium has 300 seats. Currently, what space do you use on campus for that purpose?
Yeah, we use a lot of them, actually. So we kind of move between spaces in the Connolly Center, classrooms in Driscoll Hall, in Drosdick Hall, in the Mullen Center, and other areas on campus as available between class schedules. And so it really kind of depends on the room we're able to secure that day in terms of how many are able to be accommodated in that space. So sometimes during our tours, the information session will be capped and we'll allow additional people to still be on the tour, but that they're not able to sit in on that session just because there's not space in there.
Is there another 300-seat auditorium that you utilize currently on campus?
We do sometimes utilize the one that is in the Mullen Center, which is our Performing Arts Center, but it rarely. Okay.
You're using the one in the Button Center?
We are utilizing part of the auditorium space in our Mullen Center for some of our tours.
Okay. And how often do you use that?
That's very rarely. So it's more typical that we're using the ones on the main campus piece, and then not all of our visitors are able to take part in the information session.
They're smaller than 300 seats.
It is a little bit smaller, yes.
Okay. So this is a nice upgrade for this function.
Yeah, I think that the tour group size would stay similar, but this would allow us to accommodate everyone in the information session that occurs prior.
So on this floor also then, well, going back to the auditorium. Is it going to be open for any kind of public use at all?
No, that is not the intention at all. It's really a very important admission office need, and so it's being built and would be designed specifically as part of our office and as part of that meeting space to do that introduction. We don't really see any reasons why there would be any outside things held there.
But it could be used for other Villanova functions because your admissions office has busy periods and then it has slower periods. So it would be available for other Villanova functions, correct?
Potentially, we'll sometimes do new staff orientation and things that will come meet in our spaces. And so I could see internal uses, where again, people are arriving by foot over the bridge using that. But there's really no intention for us to invite outside groups to use this space ever.
So then the remainder on the first floor, on the west side of the site here, there is a toward touchdown. Does that mean the end?
Yeah, no. So
Door?
that's actually what we are calling the area where our student volunteers would have a space to put their book bags and their coats and stuff while they're giving a tour. And then south of that, the support staff area would be a lot of our administrative staff that takes incoming phone calls, mail, applications that come in. The area just directly next to that would be storage. We do give most of our visitors some information as they come, either a campus map or pamphlets, so that would be an area to store that right in our space. And then kind of continuing right above that would just be some smaller conference spaces where we'll sometimes have private conversations with families about their individual situations, either with admission or financial aid, and just need a space to close the door and have those conversations.
Then on the second floor, on the west side here, there is an alumni lounge. Do you know what the size of that is by any chance?
I do not know that, sorry.
Okay. There's a textbook sales and storage, and then the university shop. And that spans both lots here. The university shop would sell Villanova gear, books. What else would be sold in the university shop?
Yeah, typically my assumption would be majority apparel is what is being sold these days. And so that would be the bulk of what would be there. We do have a textbook plan for our students where many don't have to come directly in person and pick them all off the shelf like they did back when I went to college. And so oftentimes they'll just kind of pick them up already prepared. And so there's less space dedicated to the actual book part of it these days.
And the university shop, I guess, on both floors, I mean, hours, 9 to 5 generally, or different hours than that?
I believe that their hours are very typical to what our normal business hours are, though, but I'm not exactly sure what the hours are.
But anybody can come and buy something in here. It's not just closed to potential students or alumni. Anybody can park off the street and come into the university shop.
Yes, if anybody wants a Villanova sweatshirt, they're welcome to come and get one there.
Okay. And the Alumni Walk Hall of Fame? What's proposed for that?
That is a lovely name for a hallway, and we're anticipating our tours will actually come upstairs to allow a direct access onto the bridge rather than try to get them across St. Thomas Way or something, really use the feature of the space where we're at. And so we're really hoping along there to just highlight some of our alumni. And so thankfully we got a new one recently that's a pretty good one to put up there with the Pope, right? He can headline this, and then we'll have some other good alumni down that hallway is kind of the thought, but it would really just be pictures.
I'm sure he'll have his own special spot on the Hall of Fame, I'm sure. I don't have any other questions for Mr. Harris.
No, I'm not, no redirect.
Just curious about the size of that auditorium. 300, do you ever have that many now?
We do. So our tours during our busy times, we really have kind of just over the years tried to perfect how that visit experience is and want it to be as optimal as it can for people coming to visit. And that's really kind of been our sweet spot. And so on the times right now when we have a lot of interest in people coming, that's where we'll typically cap our tours right now. And again, maybe worth noting, they're coming as a family. And so typically most are bringing one or two parents or sometimes additional family members with them in a single vehicle. And so they kind of all come in, I guess, as part of that, but really trickle in over the period of typically 30 to 40 minutes ahead, like ones and twos as they would come for the visit.
And is that going to be at like a lecture hall with the bank? or just a flat floor?
I'm not sure we've gotten that far yet, but it would really, again, just be, a space, even almost like this, where we would just want to be able to speak to people in a room. And so whatever would be the best way to have them be able to see us as we do that. But it is pretty simple. It's just typically a single staff member that is presenting some information, maybe with a screen to show some videos and other information. But it's normally, a pretty, again, I would say more like a lecture hall than like a theater, where it really is just you have the podium and the screen.
Do you happen to know how big the theater is in Connolly?
It holds about 200 seats, and so that's one of our challenges now, is that some of those days where we have more there for tours, not everybody can fit in that space for the information session.
And then you have the big event space in Connolly also.
We do, and many years ago we would use that sometimes for this, and we came to find it just wasn't a good visit experience when it got that big, and so we've stopped doing that actually since 2020, once we kind of reshuffled things coming as we reopened, and so we've really not been using that space ever since then for those visits.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just want to make sure I heard that right. So the tour groups are typically about 300 people at a time?
So it really depends on the time of the year. So, we typically see demand when maybe high schools aren't in session and we are, or times of the year where people are really trying to visit a little bit more. And so we're normally busier during kind of spring break times. Normally the month of April, just people are making their final decisions as May 1st approaches. Over the summertime, we get a lot of vacationer traffic. That's a lot of our really out-of-state people, out-of-country people that come to visit during that time. And then kind of early into the fall as people are making that decision. But then really from November, December, January, and into a good part of February, it's a significantly lower number of people that are coming to visit during that time.
Okay, but I guess just so that I'm clear or understanding it properly, a morning tour could consist of parents, prospective students, total of about 300.
It potentially can, depending on the time. As we look at, I was kind of digging through a few things before tonight, and a lot of those end up being around 70 to 80 students, and that's normally probably maybe could make the jump. That's how many vehicles they're coming in, and so it really would then be their family members that might travel there with them.
Okay, so that's the morning session, but then similar for an afternoon session?
Sometimes, again, it depends. We normally get heavier traffic on Mondays and Fridays, just it's easier to take a day off that way. There are really, I would say, substantial parts of the year where it is quite a bit lower than that, but that's really where we're maximizing now, just on the visit experience. But
if I'm hearing you correctly, then
yes,
potentially up to 600 people in any one tour day.
Sometimes, again, just on the busy times a year. But today, for example, we had 70 families that came to visit us today. So it really does kind of depend on, not families, total people come to visit us. So it really is dependent on the time of year, on when it is a little bit busier than not. But I would say there are many, many more days that are not that than are approaching that.
Quick question. I think your testimony was clear, but I want to make sure it's correct. You mentioned that approximately 50% of a certain number actually come to visit. Were you referring to 50% of the applicants or 50% of those that receive an admission letter?
Yeah, that's a great. I don't want to misspeak on a statistic with there, but I would say that we do see a chunk of people that don't ever visit campus during the process. We call them stealth applicants, where they will apply without ever stepping foot on Villanova or ever meeting with us at their high school or on the road. I don't want to give you an incorrect number for that, but it is substantial. And so that group of people typically doesn't visit. But maybe what I was kind of referring to is that we've seen a shift that people are waiting to visit until after that letter of admission comes out. And those, depending on the round that you apply, are either released in November, February, or March. January, February, March. And so they really kind of, after that November window, start kind of trickling in for some of those visits. And so I think that's why maybe over this span of time where we've really seen an increase in applications, the number of visitors really hasn't changed that much, and it's actually gone a little bit down, that they're not just kind of scattershotting, visiting a bunch of campuses prior to decisions. They're maybe doing that virtually now, and then are coming to visit once the decision's been released.
All right, thank you.
Is it fair, though, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that 50% number, is it fair to say then that you experienced roughly 12 to 13,000 people per year visiting campus?
Yeah, in terms of the number of students to visit, I believe it was less than that this year. So actually, I guess it'd be less than 50% were visiting as part of that daily visit.
Couple follow-ups.
Mr. Harris, you mentioned that Moriarty is used as a student dorm, I think 46 places or 46 students. I didn't catch it. But where would those students be relocated?
So we don't, I guess, specifically assign like that they would switch to one spot. They would kind of be just back in our general housing lottery. And so students each year, kind of with available beds and spaces, are assigned to various. I guess that would just come offline from the places where they could potentially
They'll be spread around the existing dormitories, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, is that a
Oh,
yes?
sorry. Yes. Sorry.
And then you mentioned another office space. I didn't quite see that or where that's located here on the exhibits, but it's Farrell Hall?
Yeah.
Is
Yes.
that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. And that's now offices, is that right?
I believe so.
And that would be taken down as part of the plan?
No, that is untouched in this plan.
Where is Farrell? Somebody pointed out to me.
Right here.
Showing on A3A,
It's over here.
furthest
Oh,
building
there.
on the left.
Okay, got it. Thank you very much.
Are you able to comment with this exhibit, and maybe it's for a different witness, but are you able to comment where the building would lie looking at 3A?
That might be better for a different witness.
Fine.
Yeah, George is going to testify next. He'll get more into where it's located and the square footage and things of that nature.
John, any other questions?
No.
All right, what we're going to do is withhold public comment until after we've heard from all of the witnesses. So we'll do that at one time, although the members of the board will question the individuals after they've testified, as we normally do. Okay, so call your next witness.
I just have a couple follow-up with
okay.
Matt. Matt, you had mentioned a number of visitors currently to campus. Do you anticipate an increase in the number of visitors as a result of this new Welcome Center?
Yeah, as I mentioned, no, I don't. We really have seen very consistent numbers through a lot of changes at Villanova. And so, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've had, additional interest from a couple basketball championships. COVID times, we saw less, obviously, during that time. But really, over the last 9-year window, it's actually been declining, the number of people who are physically coming to campus during the admission process.
And when they come to campus, where do they park?
They're parking in these exact lots here.
In the A3A lots?
Mm-hmm.
And will they continue to park in that area?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have.
Now I have a couple questions. So, Matt, when you testified earlier, I asked you about the number of applicants. You said 26,300, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then I asked you how many come for a tour, and you said about half. That's accurate, correct?
Okay, I apologize. So this year it was a little bit less than that,
Okay.
than half.
So it's less than 13,000.
It was, yeah, it was less than 13,000 or
Okay.
and change.
Okay. And then the Moriarty students, just so I understand it, will move back into the general population for housing somewhere else?
That's as far as I know, yes, that would be the step. So this would just come offline, and then they would be back in the pool for the other available buildings that we have.
And the employees at Garrity and Griffin, where are they going to end up at?
They will move, but I'm not sure where.
Okay, nothing else?
That's all I have. No, I might stay here because you're going to be probably playing with that. Yeah, play.
When you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth.
I do.
And state your full name.
My name is George DeBrigard, it's spelled Debrigard. And I am an associate partner at Robert A. M. Stern Architects in.
Yeah, let me ask,
It would be better if he sat down here.
but he's going to
Here.
be, see if he can talk.
Can you just, how about, I'll take that.
All right, there you go.
How's that?
Okay, let's have the name one more.
Okay, George DeBrigard. Debrigard. Okay.
George, I've marked as A17. Is that your curriculum vitae?
Yes,
How are you employed?
I'm an associate partner at Robert A. M. Stern Architects.
And how long you been there?
I've been there for 18 years.
And what's your qualifications here? You're an AIA architect?
Yes, I'm a registered architect in the state of New York and a member of AAA.
And what is your educational background?
I studied, I got my master's of architecture at Yale University.
And what type of projects do you normally work on?
I work almost exclusively on academic and institutional projects for universities, colleges, and some secondary schools, almost entirely in the United States.
And
Secondary schools
how long have you been working on those projects?
for the entire time that I've been at Robert Stern Architects,
And how long has that been?
18 years.
And have you testified previously before various boards?
Yes,
And you've been qualified as an expert in architecture for schools?
yes.
I request that he be qualified as an expert for architecture for higher education.
No.
So George, talking about A3 there, could you quickly describe what we're seeing there? And in particular, if you can on A3, we'll do it other exhibits too. Can you show the commercial office and the planned institutional differentiation?
Yes, so this aerial view of the Villanova campus and its precinct with the major arterial access shows how you get from 476 onto Lancaster Avenue, which comes into the Villanova campus between the main campus on the north and the CO space that runs from about Sproul Road over to St. Thomas Way, which is just to the right of the red marker here at Moriarty Hall. And then the CICD continues just after the footbridge and continues through the Commons, the Lancaster student housing, over to South Ithan and the parking. It includes the parking garage and the PAC.
Turning to 3A, and can you just describe there, is that a common parking area? Is it paved over both the CIC or both the institutional and the CO districts?
So yes, it is. So the division in between the CO and the CIC, well, the CO and the planned institutional areas in the right-of-way of St. Thomas Way. And then the CICD currently starts on the east of the walkway. But as you can see, the whole area, and I believe this was done as part of the CICD development, the whole area was unified into a single network of circulation and parking that extends from the first right turn lane off of Lancaster Avenue, continues behind the parking lots at Garrity and Griffin and Moriarty, past St. Thomas Way to the visitors lot next to the bridge, and then through the access road that goes behind the Commons all the way to South Ithan.
And if we can, perhaps is A4?
Yes.
And can you describe what A4
Yeah.
represents?
So this is a view looking from the north side of Lancaster, just at about the intersection here of St. Thomas Way and Lancaster. You can see on the left a little bit of the bridge that connects this side of campus across to the foot of the church. And you can see St. Thomas going up underneath this bridge that is in the middle of the two wings of the building. And so this is generally a pedestrianized view of the arrival at this building of campus if you're coming from the west.
And A5?
A5 is a view in the opposite direction, so now you're basically standing at the foot of the pedestrian bridge on the north side of Lancaster, looking back and through the archway under the bridge to the south side of the lot, and beyond the frame to the right would be the continuation of the parking lots that go over towards Farrell.
What's the facade of the building?
It's random ashlar bluestone, which is consistent with the campus texture. One of the things about this building as a welcome center is that it's an attempt to sort of highlight the things that are special about Villanova. And then as architects, one of the things that we find special about it is the architectural character, this kind of collegiate Gothic that's made out of a particular stone blend that is common to many of the buildings on campus, mixed with precast simulated masonry. And so this is really an attempt to sort of have a nice introduction to campus that's both welcoming but also a tailored feeling that has the scale that's welcoming but all of the key materials and aspects of the campus architecture.
If you can turn to A6, please. And A6, the zoning site plan, and if you could go over where the PI is on that plan, as well as the commercial office.
Yeah. So the PI is to the right or east of this line here. That's sort of on the curb of St. Thomas Way. The CO extends all the way to the left or to the west.
And in the CO, office use is permitted?
Yes, office use is permitted.
All right. And in the CO is institutional retail type use permitted?
No, it's not permitted.
Currently, there's a non-conforming dormitory?
Yes.
In that area? Okay. And we're not making, is there any request being made on the PI institutional district this evening?
No.
And you heard me say during opening that would be a conditional use
Yes.
process. Can you describe how the building transverses the PI and the CO? And you're going to be referring to, make certain you mentioned the exhibit you're referencing.
I'm going to use A9.
Or do you want to
Actually,
use,
I'm going to move forward to
A7, maybe?
Use A7, yeah. So this is a site plan showing the roof of the building over the combined parking lots and the future plan for the landscape going all the way to the west. So what you see here is that the building is designed as one a continuous building. From the air, it looks like a single structure. It has the archway through that we can see in the renderings that allows passage of vehicles from the Lancaster Avenue access under St. Thomas Way behind to the circulation that's already present on the site. It sits on the PI side on top of what is now a visitor parking lot, and it connects at the second floor to the landing of the bridge which is where the stairs and the elevator come up to get access across the bridge. And then over on the west side of the building, it has a facade that faces the visitor parking, so that when visitors come into the site, they travel underneath the building, they can park in the visitor parking, they get out of their cars, and then they can see a clear entrance to begin their visiting sequence.
That parking area to the west of the building, how is that currently illuminated, and how will it be illuminated in the future?
It uses a campus standard of pole-mounted luminaires, which will be consistent with what is currently there now.
So nothing will change as far as the lighting is concerned?
No.
Referring to A8, and again, that kind of shows the...
Yeah, this shows
district?
the overlay of the two districts and the footprint of the building a little more clearly on this enlarged plan. And so you can see that this PI CICD extension is just off of the curb of St. Thomas Way, and that about a little more than half of the building sits in the CO district to the west, and that these different zoning areas have slightly different setback requirements, all of which have been respected by the massing of the building on the site.
A9?
So this is a diagram that shows the internal distribution of gross building area according to the type of use and where it sits in the two zoning overlays. So the sort of yellow color is the Welcome Center program, the sort of institutional component of the program that has the admissions office functions that Matt was describing earlier. And then the peach color is the program that's related to the university shop, and both the net space, or the retail front of house, and then all of the other support spaces that are required in order to have the university store function.
Now, what's the square footage of Moriarty Hall, the dormitory?
It's 9,757 feet.
And how much retail are you placing on the CO zoning district?
14,200.
Is that less than a 50% increase?
Yes.
As indicated on?
It's
A9
indicated
now?
on A9.
And as we stated before, Moriarty was a non-conforming institutional dormitory type. As we stated before, Moriarty is a non-conforming institutional.
Yes, it's a non-conforming institutional
Dormitory.
dormitory.
And it's being replaced by what?
It's being replaced by a retail use.
Also from an institutional.
Yes.
If you can turn to and then why don't we talk a little bit about the Welcome Center as well? The Welcome Center is an office use you're proposing?
Yes, it's a combined suite of spaces that have office spaces and support spaces, and a series of functions that are brought together in order to support admissions at Villanova.
And that use is permitted in the CO district, in the commercial office district. The office
Yes,
use is
yes.
permitted in the commercial office district. Now, we've mentioned an auditorium and a space to greet parents. Is that common in other colleges to have that type of space?
Yes, I mean our architectural firm has done a number of facilities like this, welcome centers, admissions offices across the country. The idea of this kind of modern welcome center admissions office is that you are trying to attract students mainly who are not particularly familiar with your campus and your institution. They often travel a long way to get there, and so you're bringing them in to the building. We talked a little bit earlier when we were looking at the renderings of the idea that this kind of sales pitch, if you will, begins at the street. You then bring them into the building. They're often a little worn out from their trip, so it's important to sort of provide them with a comforting welcome space. They have to go to the bathroom, they have to get a drink, they have to sort of calm down. This is also a time that's kind of fraught for many families on these tours. And then you collect them into the Welcome Center and into some lobby spaces, and then what's very common is this use of a introductory video presentation Q&A session in order to orient the students to the campus that they're about to see. It's sort of a process of telling them what you're about to show them by introducing the features of the campus that you want them to be most attuned to on their tour. So this kind of auditorium, lecture hall space, basically an assembly space for a presentation, is very common in these facilities now.
So referencing the requirements for expansion of a non-conforming use, are you increasing the non-conforming use by more than 50%?
No.
Object to that question. He's not a zoning expert. That calls for a legal opinion regarding the non-conforming use sections. He's also given some other zoning opinions, which I haven't objected to, but I'm objecting to that one. He can talk about the math, he can talk about the footprint, he can talk about how much we're expanding it, but he can't be giving legal zoning opinions. He's an architect.
I'll withdraw the question. Have you as to the dimensional requirements, as to the setbacks, can you describe what the setbacks are for these buildings?
Yes. Sorry, I'm going to use the larger printout.
And just make certain you
Yeah,
reference.
so I'm using a printout of A9 that I can read the text on. So the PI setback is 35 feet, so everything on the right of the dividing line fits within 35 feet, more than 35 feet off of the Lancaster side, 50 feet off of the south side from the railroad tracks. On the CO side, the setback is 25 feet from the railroad tracks, which is actually only gets you to the access road, and we also comply with the setback off of Lancaster, which is 65.
How tall is the building, the height, the proposed building?
It fits within the zoning limit of
Less than
35
35 feet.
Yeah. 35
Less than
feet.
35 feet. Regarding the building, do you foresee any excessive noise coming from this building?
No.
How about dust,
No.
smoke,
No.
any fire hazard?
No.
I'm sure you're designing the building to,
Well, we're designing it as a modern building, which should be, it's scheduled to meet LEED Silver, so it should be a environmentally sensitive building that does not produce any sort of dust, toxins, noise.
referring to A10, can you just describe what that represents? And if you can, in particular, regarding the signage is one of the requests here this evening.
So this is an elevation drawing, so a straight-on drawing from Lancaster Avenue looking south at the north elevation of the building. Sort of flattens the two projecting wings that you've seen in the plans and the renderings. Those are the bays on either side. In the middle, you see the volume that comes together with the bridge in the middle. And then there is a arrow that indicates where we're proposing signage over the top of that bridge. The bridge has to be tall enough in order to allow vehicles and emergency vehicles through, so it has to have a minimum clear span of 14 feet at the lowest point. And so I'm going to move on to A11, which is an enlarged elevation of that same area, and you can see that we're proposing to have a location in order to inscribe signage above that archway, which would put it above the signage limit.
Referencing the floor plans that we talked about earlier with a prior witness, if you could, I believe it's A19.
Where do they? It seems like they skip.
There it is.
Yes.
Could you describe, but you designed this, correct?
Yes.
Or your firm did. Could you describe how the flow works and how this works?
Yeah. So as I said, we think about this from the moment you're driving through campus, and then also as you head off to the tour and back to the tour. So this starts as you're coming off of Lancaster Avenue, that you have an address in your Google Maps or whatever it is, but you see the place that you're going. It's clearly identifiable. You're actually driving right there. You drive underneath it, and then you come back to the visitor parking that starts on the left side but continues further to the west. You get out of your car. I mentioned that there's a facade that has a clear entrance that comes off of that visitor parking side. You progress through the building into a greeting area. So there's a welcome desk here, and at that point you can be given information about how to get to the bathrooms, how to get to the sort of refreshment area at the waiting area, and then also, if necessary, be directed directly into the auditorium for the Q&A and tour presentation. And so the idea is that all of this is a very linear and clear sequence, that they're the minimum number of turns. It's not sort of a surprise where you're going, because the majority of the visitors to this building are people who have never been on campus before. They've never seen this building before. You want it to be very self-evident what you're doing. There are a number of other spaces here. There are some small meeting rooms for being able to have smaller meetings with family members when people come down from the admissions office. There's also, as Matt Harris described, a tour touchdown room. So there's a place for the student tour guides to kind of wait for their opportunity to come meet the prospective students and their families, that they're kept sort of out of the way and not mingling with this population that's just had their car ride to get here. And then there are a number of support spaces for that I think Matt Harris described their use of. So then you come into this auditorium, you're able to have this introductory presentation and Q&A session, and then the tour guides can come in and meet their groups and basically peel tour groups out of the auditorium and progress up to the second floor, either through the stairway that comes up through the lobby waiting area or through the elevator that's here in the middle of the plan. They then come up to the second floor and traverse the plan through this alumni walk, and that brings them over to the connection to the bridge and then allows them to lead directly onto campus. So now they've come out of the building looking at one of the most iconic views of the campus, looking directly across the bridge at the church. In our office, we're constantly amazed at the number of photographs you see on Instagram of Villanova from across this bridge. It's really quite a notable vista. You then can go off on the tour, and then when you come back, you can either come back through the bridge, or for tours that come back visiting the Commons, the Lancaster housing, they can come back and get directly back into the building, up through the stairs, the elevator, back on the bridge, and then reverse their process through the building, collect their things, and then leave to the visitor parking.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions at this time.
Yeah, just on this particular exhibit, it says it's Exhibit A19, Supplemental Parking Plan. My Exhibit A19
Oh,
says Welcome Center and University Shop. So,
Judge John, we're going to, on the parking plan, Mike Roth will testify as to parking. If
so is there a second Exhibit A19 we're going to put into the record, or is this?
no, this is, sorry.
I'm just looking at how
Yeah.
that's labeled, and this is labeled differently. It looks the same.
It is the same. It's the number is the same. The caption is incorrect
Okay.
on the
Okay.
version on the screen.
There's a lot of maps and plans floating around here, so I just.
The exhibit number is correct.
Yeah, it looks the same, too. Mr. DeBergard?
Yes.
Okay, just a few questions. You testified, I believe, regarding A7, right?
Yes.
A8,
Yes.
A9,
Yes.
and some of the elevation.
A10 and A11. Yes.
Did you prepare these?
Yes, our office prepared these.
Pardon me?
We prepared them in our office. Yes.
Okay, okay,
I did not.
okay. But someone else did it?
Yes, I did not prepare every drawing, but we prepared these.
Okay, because, Robert Stern Architects is on some documents and it's not on other documents, so I'm just trying to,
Yes.
I want to make sure before I ask you questions about it. So, Mr. Cornelia asked you a few questions about zoning. Did you review the township zoning ordinance?
Yes, we've read
did. Okay.
read the township zoning ordinance.
But you've
I-
never been a zoning officer?
I am not a zoning
and
officer.
You've never been qualified as an expert in zoning, correct?
I have not been.
Okay, you're an architect.
I am an architect.
Right. And he had asked you, well, let me read you what's permitted in the CO zoning district. In the CO, which is where Moriarty Hall is, in the commercial office zoning district, here are the uses that are permitted. Office or studio, not involving characteristics normally associated with retail activities. Bank or similar financial institution. Sorry. Bank or similar financial institution, and daycare, private kindergarten, or similar use, and then accessory uses. So, Mr. Cornelia asked you to agree with him that the Welcome Center was a office use. Do you believe the Welcome Center is an office use?
I believe it is an admission. Often in its title, it's an admissions office. It has significant office components. So,
But it's an institutional use, is it not? It's going to be owned by Villanova?
it will be owned by Villanova.
It's going to be operated by Villanova? It's an institutional use, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And you also said that welcome centers are common in university projects, which is an area that you specialize in.
Yes.
Okay. So, so this is not uncommon for a university to want to build a welcome center
It's not uncommon.
adjacent to the rest of the campus, right?
Correct.
You also testified regarding A7. So can we put A7 up there for a minute? And okay, and the most of the application tonight, as Mr. Cornelia mentioned, has to do with the nonconformities in the CO district and what is going to be built in the CO district. And I think you testified that there's a break between the CO district and the PI district, which would be at St. Thomas Way, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so the CO district is a separate lot from the PI district on this plan, on A7, correct?
Yes, the zoning overlay splits at that line.
What do you mean, the zoning overlay split?
That if you look at a zoning overlay map of this property, there is a split between the CO zoning and the PI zoning at that edge of St. Thomas Way.
Okay. So, the proposed building construction is going to build across both of the lot lines. The CO lot line that abuts St. Thomas Way, and then the PI lot line, which abuts it on the other side. This building is going to
The building
built
goes
across
The
it.
building goes across the two zoning overlays.
Okay. So we're not providing for any side yard setbacks for either of these lots, correct?
Correct.
On some of the plans, there is a front yard setback and a rear yard setback, but there's no side yard setback between these two separate lots, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How many university projects have you been involved with?
Over 2 dozen.
Okay. And how many at Villanova?
This is the third project I've been involved with at Villanova.
Okay. What were the other Villanova projects?
Drosdick Hall, the engineering building.
Okay.
Drosdick, Drosdick, and the new library.
Okay. Okay, and on the, on Exhibit A9, which has the square footage distribution between the two zoning districts, this table, and I'm looking at level 1 floor plan, shows that within the CO district, there will be 14,200 square feet of university shop, correct?
Yes, correct.
And there will be 14,804 square feet of welcome center area in the CO district also.
Correct.
And included within that welcome center, 14,804 square feet, is the auditorium.
Correct.
Okay. No other questions for Mr. DeBrigard?
Redirect? George, the dormitory in the CO district, that's a non-conforming use?
Yes.
That's owned by Villanova?
Yes.
It's operated by Villanova?
Yes.
It's an institutional dormitory?
Yes.
It's used for institutional purposes?
Yes.
As to the area on A9, is that a unified plan? Unified parking for the whole site?
Yes, there are, it's not the complete parking for the site, but the beginning of the connected parking lots are shown on A9.
Is everything integrated?
Yes, it is. Once you sort of, as you're going down Lancaster Avenue, there are no individual driveways or access points to the buildings on this part of campus. They enter in through St. Thomas Way into a single circulation route that runs parallel to the rail tracks east-west. And so it's one precinct.
Is there anything that indicates two separate lots or two separate parcels?
No.
I have nothing further.
I do have one question. In order to, looking at the plan Exhibit A7, it has it outlines the footprint of Garrity Hall and Griffin Hall and Moriarty Hall. Is that right?
Yes.
And not being an architect, this may seem simplistic, but in order to build the parking lot that appears here, Garrity and Griffin Halls have to be removed completely.
Yes, they're being demolished.
And the same thing with Moriarty Hall. You could not build the building that appears there as it appears if Moriarty Hall wasn't removed.
Yes, it needs to be demolished to fit this building.
All right.
I also have a question. I believe you touched on this earlier, but given the building is spanning over St. Thomas Way, there is adequate clearance for emergency vehicles and
Yes, there is.
for ingress and egress. Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Okay. Unless there's some redirect, no other questions from the board?
No, nothing further.
Okay.
Mike? And why don't you stand there, help with that too.
I did.
George
They
Michael
would
Raw,
extinguish
and I go by
the
my middle name, Michael.
nonconformity.
ROTH. This,
No, what, you can, maybe just hold it. Mike, what is your profession?
I'm a civil engineer.
And I have handed up A18. Is that your curriculum vitae?
Yes,
Are you a registered Pennsylvania engineer?
I am, yes.
By whom are you employed?
Pennoni Associates.
And are,
Pennoni Associates, Pennoni.
and how long have you been employed by them?
Nearly 3 years.
And are you the project engineer for this project?
I am,
And has Pennoni represented Villanova University previously?
yes.
Calling your attention first, if I may, showing you what's been marked as A20. They recorded the SEER plan. Do you recall that plan? Do you know what that plan is?
Yeah, so that's the record plan for the SEER project, also known as Drosdick Hall.
Is that the record plan that's recorded at the county of Delaware?
Yes, that is.
Was there a parking calculation done by Pennoni? Was there a parking calculation done by Pennoni on
Yes.
that? And what did they use for their parking calculations?
The parking calculations were done as a unified campus. There's a footnote at the bottom of the parking
Just
table.
interrupt for a second. Has there been a stipulation regarding expert testimony?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't have any questions.
So admit it without objection.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
There's a footnote at the bottom of the parking table that references a surplus of parking that is provided by the new law school garage.
And did they do a campus-wide parking calculation? Did Pennoni use a campus-wide parking calculation?
Yes,
They didn't just use parking for that area of campus?
that is correct.
And A21? And
A21 is the record or recorded plan for the new library project, also known as Majidi Hall. Majidi Hall.
And did Pennoni do the parking calculations for that project as well?
Yes.
And did they, what parking calculations did they use for that project?
The parking calculation was done on an overall campus basis. It also has footnotes referencing other areas of the site.
And both those plans were land development plans?
Correct.
And both those plans were approved by Radnor Township?
Correct.
Now, did you do a parking calculation for this project?
We did, yes.
And is that on A6 there?
That is, yes.
And what did you use for the parking calculations for that project on A6?
So we utilized the overall campus to determine the parking requirements. Furthermore, we analyzed the removal of the existing structures that were mentioned earlier, Moriarty Hall, Griffin, and Garrity Halls, and then additionally looked at the uses in the proposed building to calculate what would be required as part of the new building.
And did this plan comply with those parking requirements of the township?
It does, yes.
Referring to A22, did you also do a supplemental parking plan?
We did, yes.
And what was that done based upon, what was that done?
So for this parking plan, we looked at only the CO portion of the campus, so what's shown here on the exhibit, and we analyzed both or all three of the existing structures to be removed. There's 2 additional office buildings to the west side, Stone Hall and Farrell Hall. Those were included in the parking calculation, as well as the proposed welcome center.
And what do those numbers represent?
Those numbers show that we have the minimum number of parking spaces required. It meets the code.
Just in the CO district?
Just in the CO district.
And you calculated the other buildings as well that are not being removed?
Correct, yes.
And you put a parking calculation in for those as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Finally, as far as stormwater is concerned for this project, is there a stormwater plan for the project?
That'll be fully developed in land development, but conceptually, yes. We intend to meet the township's code as it relates to stormwater, as well as any NPDS requirements, state and federal.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Roth, could you look at, we put A6 back up there, please? Okay. You prepared this zoning site plan, is that right?
That's correct.
And this shows a portion of the CO zoning district and the proposed 25,695 square foot building footprint in the CO, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then St. Thomas Way, where's the property line on this plan between the PI district and the CO district? Can you point it out on this plan?
Sure. So the line runs coincident with the right-of-way on the east side of St. Thomas Way. If you are looking, and George is highlighting it on Exhibit A6,
Okay.
it sort of runs down that sidewalk.
So that's a property line for that PI piece of this project that runs all the way over to Aldwin
Correct.
Lane, correct? Okay. And then the rest of, to the west of that is that's a property line also for the CO district and the lot that Moriarty Hall's on, and Garrity Hall's on, and Griffin Hall's on. And according to A22, that parcel runs all the way over to Stone Hall.
Correct.
Okay, they're all on the same parcel.
Correct.
Okay. And on A22, there's no side yard setback where this building's proposed to be constructed, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Typically, you would have a front yard setback, a side yard setback, and a rear yard setback on any kind of a project on a particular lot, correct?
Correct. And in our experience with Villanova, we've handled the campus as a unified campus, so we've viewed the whole campus as one property.
Well, that's Villanova's concept, but that's not what the zoning code requires, is it?
That's the way the previous projects have been approved.
With no side yard setbacks? Or front yard setbacks?
Complying with the required setbacks.
Okay. And then the parking that you testified to, the other, this engineering building and the library building, that parking was calculated for those projects based on the entire campus?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And that's one way to do a parking compliance plan. Another way is to take it lot by lot, correct?
Sure, yes.
I mean, if you were going to build on a vacant lot, an office building, you would have to provide for all the parking for that office building on that particular lot, right?
Yes, unless there's code provisions to provide it off-site, but yes.
Right, if there's some kind of shared parking provisions, that kind of thing. There aren't any of those in the Radnor code, are there?
Not that I'm aware of.
I don't have any other questions for Mr. Roth.
Mr. Chairman, I do. Sir, looking at the zoning compliance, I don't know if it's on this one. The packet that I have does not have exhibit numbers. But I believe it's a plan that your office prepared that has a zoning compliance summary, but I may be mistaken. That one, correct, on A6. So looking at A6. Did your office prepare that table?
Yes,
So that table has a side yard setback on it, correct?
yes.
Where is that side yard that it's referring to?
It's taken all the way over to beyond Farrell Hall, I believe,
Okay, to the west.
to the west.
Okay. I have no other questions. Thank you.
I have no other questions for this witness.
Yeah, nothing further. Mary Lou? Yeah, last time, just in case we, yeah, that's it.
I do. Mary Lou Smith, Marilou Smith. You're welcome.
Mary Lou, what's your profession?
I am the Vice President of Facilities Management at Villanova University, and I am an electrical engineer.
And what's your duties at Villanova?
It's to oversee the facilities on the university campus.
And how long have you been at Villanova?
I've been at Villanova for 28 years.
Showing what's been up on the board as A3, is campus integrated? Or do you treat this as one campus, and why?
Yes, we do. We treat this as all these different areas on campus all support the main campus. Or so I think I heard the solicitor say something about if it was an office building, you would have parking for that office building. However, these are different. All these spaces on our campus are used by everyone that works at this campus. So there's assigned parking for all of our employees, but they traverse different parts of our campus all the time. So it is really one unified campus.
Are the different parts of campus distinct parts of property?
We look at it as one campus.
And so is the commercial office, is that considered a distinct part of campus, isolated from the rest of campus?
It is not.
How about the other areas of campus? You reference, sometimes you talk about South Campus, West Campus, Main Campus, Law School. Is that a differentiation?
We call them South Campus, West Campus because of the location of where they are. However, if you look at our South Campus, it's residence halls that all use Main Campus for academic spaces, dining halls, our library, same with West Campus. There are residence halls over there. There's the bookshop, and then there's Main Campus where all the academic features are. So, everyone traverses all parts of it, which is why we consider it one unified campus.
Would you consider Villanova's made an overt attempt to integrate the entire campus?
Absolutely. I think just looking at the development on Lancaster Avenue, we put interior roadways in there so that we could connect from one spot to the other, and consider it, an integrated campus. If you look at the St. Thomas Way too, it's that one entrance in, and it connects both CO and CICD, so that people can come and go and be part of the entire campus.
Referring to A3A, you're familiar, obviously, with that. Those paved areas, do they transverse the different properties and go across the property lines? Or what would be, as Mr. Rice references, its property lines?
Property lines or zoning lines? Yes.
Zoning lines, yeah.
They do. So, we now have a roadway from Aldwyn, our two buildings down there, that come through the interior of this space, travel behind those office buildings, the residence halls of Moriarty, and cross over into the new development, which takes you to our I-1 garage, which really is a centralized location for parking. So we don't really typically have parking outside of a certain building. We use our campus to park people and centralize that.
So is there any intent to consider campus as anything but a whole?
No.
One question regarding Moriarty, since it became non-conforming, are you aware of any additions or extensions to it?
No.
That's all I have.
I don't have any questions for Ms. Smith.
Okay, thank you. Chris?
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please. Got it.
Amongst the exhibits that were submitted by the applicant are two deeds. They're fairly old deeds, but do you know what these deeds represent? Are the properties that we're looking at in this application, that these deeds represent when they were acquired?
John, the deed does represent when it was acquired. The CO, I think we all agree that the CO, those lots, that has been, that is one consolidated area. That was all merged. What you're looking there is when the property was purchased.
But they're purchased from two different individuals, and two different deeds were recorded in
Right.
media.
Back, but they have all been consolidated into one, and I don't think there's any issue
Well,
with it.
I guess the question, and I tried to read those deeds, and, they're not really clear. So I guess the question is, are the deeds that were filed with the application, do they reflect that whole CO district from St. Thomas More all the way down
No.
to Aldwin?
They don't, but I have a recorded plan that does reflect it, which we talked about earlier. I can make it as an exhibit.
I think we would, so these deeds reflect just the Moriarty Hall piece of this? And what about the other?
I believe it reflects Moriarty and perhaps one that was adjacent to it, and really it was just an indication of when it was purchased and when it was converted to a dormitory to establish the nonconformity. We've already agreed that there are legal nonconformities, but I can mark a plan as A25, which is, again, the recorded plan from Delaware County on the consolidation of that CO.
Well, my question is, and the reason I brought this up is because it appears that the property that we're looking at has been assembled at various times through various acquisitions from, and I'm not questioning whether it's legal, nonconformity, or whatever, it's just the acquisition.
Moriarty was acquired in 1963.
Yeah.
Again, the reason really that deed was in there is to establish a nonconformity existed in 1963 and when it started. And then the code changed after that, which made it nonconforming.
Right.
That was really the reason. I can present the consolidated plan. We do have it. I think Kevin's reviewed it. He knows that, it was all consolidated at one time by the township, approved by the township. But I'll hand it up.
That deed's not, is that deed here? Okay.
What's that?
The deed of consolidation, so that all these,
I don't think they did a deed of consolidation. I think they probably just had the Board of Assessment combine all the parcels that were probably separately deeded over time into one tax parcel. That's what's difficult to sort out with Villanova is, without looking at every deed into Villanova on the whole site. Okay, so this shows you, these are separate.
No, John, this is the consolidation.
Okay, but
All of those were
the lines,
consolidated.
well, we could talk about this offline, but I think that, part of the problem is the deeds. What do they represent?
This is the recorded plan of consolidation, signed by the township, recorded with the county in 2015.
Nick, was this entire site surveyed out? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
And this is the entire, this
Not the entire CO.
dark line
Yeah,
outline
right.
is what was consolidated
Sure.
from tax map 36, unit 33 to the west.
It does not include TS Bay. Right.
Okay.
And so that's what the plan, I guess, would, A22 shows this consolidated parcel and the parking requirement for that consolidated area.
Thank you.
I do. Christopher Kowalski, Kovolski.
Chris, by whom are you employed?
Villanova University.
And what's your position?
I am Assistant Vice President for Government Relations and External Affairs.
And how long you've been employed by Villanova University?
25 years.
As part of this project, did you meet with neighbors?
Yes, we've met with neighbors and presented this project in public over 4 times. The first being a campus master plan presentation to the public here in this room in November. We held a neighbors meeting on campus for some adjacent neighbors in the neighborhood in January. And then in March, we had 2 meetings. First, a presentation to the Board of Commissioners at a regularly scheduled meeting where we went through our campus master plan with this as one of the components. And then the following night, we held our typical spring semester neighbors meeting virtually, where we went over this project as well. And then, of course, before we came here this evening, we presented this before the Planning Commission last month.
Did any neighbors present any concerns with this plan?
No, there were some typical concerns about traffic, but not with any aspect of the plan.
Did this application proceed for recommendation and comments before the Planning Commission?
Yes, it did, and it was recommended for approval.
Did you also speak to the township prior to making application and developing plans?
Yes.
And do you recall who you spoke to or who was present at the meetings?
We've met a couple times, again, about our campus master plan with township staff, a variety of leadership in the staff, and then we've also spoken specifically about this project with the zoning officer.
And did Villanova request a zoning determination?
Yes.
From the zoning officer, marked as A23. Is that the zoning officer's response?
Yes.
It's been marked as A23. Finally, have you reviewed the Radnor new comprehensive plan?
Yes.
And have you looked at that comprehensive plan in relation to this project?
I have.
And from what you read, were you able to see any consistencies, inconsistencies, or anything of that nature?
From what I've read, I believe that this project is consistent with the township's new comprehensive plan in that it helps address needs identified as stormwater management, enhancing the Route 30 corridor, and promoting sustainable development.
And is that what we've been marked as A24, the various
Yes.
excerpts from that plan?
Yes.
That's all I have.
I don't have any questions for Mr. Kowalski.
Board have any questions? No questions from the board?
Okay. Our,
What's that?
I was gonna suggest,
Right.
I was gonna suggest.
Let my rest. Because I got a lot of questions.
I know you do, that's what I'm wondering.
Want to start them?
I don't know, that's what I'm wondering. Do you want to start him or do you just want to bring him back? You're not going to bring a traffic guy in, are you?
No, I might have somebody from Gilmore talk about the parking. But, I mean, there's a lot of new stuff here that wasn't in the
Right, I know.
So I want to give them, because they're looking at
Yeah, I know.
parking for,
Right.
I mean,
Hey, let me know what's going on with that. You know, bring vacation.
take this. This is the information that he wants for the Connolly Center. Eric's an engineer with, works with the, more of a civil engineer, municipal
Now,
engineer.
some of this stuff predated parking requirements from Radnor, just so you know.
Yeah,
Like
but
Austin Hall was, that was.
Right, but here's the issue with all this, is that there's this master parking plan. You guys did, we never verified anything. Oh, but now we're not accepting it. We're changing.
Let's face it, this is about something else, and I know. That's what I'm talking about. It's not my bailiwick, I want to need to know, I don't need to know that.
And I have no idea what, other than parking. But see if you guys can provide that information to the senior, and then, we'll get it to our agreement. But that's what. I mean, you got more of a problem with his application than that.
I know.
So, that's just, so if we can get that information, we probably, when he looks at it and comes back with whatever he comes back with, we probably need to get another extension from him.
For me personally, I'm just gonna tell you.
Yeah, I know, and they're basically, I think the position of council on that is that they haven't given us the information we need to decide whether or not they comply with the ordinance. So we get that. If you wanted to vote on it, you have an issue with the result. Every use has a parking requirement.
Look at the, whatever, there's no university, thing about, auditory, whatever, stadium.
Look, that's another. When we're done.
Let me.
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine, we're gonna, that's okay.
uh, Okay, it's in the record, it will be in the record. We're going to have a brief meeting, an executive session to decide a couple of procedural issues, and then we'll be back shortly in a few minutes.
Ryan, remember when you could drink and you didn't have to go home to Connor? Oh, well. Good times.
That's our next meeting. The whole thing? That's when the vote. No, we can finish tonight. I'll let you guys figure out what's tonight. Yeah, but they're right now. They want to finish tonight.
I just have five.
think they all have hard copies of my full report, but. No, I understand. If you put the existing parking lot.
sure you get that, all right? Good, that's why I wanted to ask you, because I wasn't sure if that was on your radar.
Let's get started.
Yeah, I think so.
So as we've reconvened now, the board met in an executive session. The purpose of that was to decide procedurally when to render our decision, as opposed to tonight. We know we have 45 days, and we wanted to give this matter all the consideration that it deserves. And consequently, we will re-adjourn on, is it the 26th of June? And we'll give our decision then. I don't see any reason why, if there's further briefing, legal argument that you want to submit by way of briefs, I don't think there's any reason why we can't have that. And that's where we are. Okay.
And one other thing, we've spoken about that too. Norma, transcript? Okay. Okay, all right. Yeah, I know she'll be quick with it. Okay. Because I probably would want to see the transcript before I write my memo. Okay? And we understand that, and I think John and I both spoke, and we have no issue with it.
Yes, the only point, I mean, based on the testimony, I had originally intended to call a witness. I think I'm going to not need to do that based on what I've already heard. I do want to recall somebody from Villanova when we're done tonight, if we can, with Mr. Tavani, because there's just a couple open questions about what's going to happen to certain properties, which we deferred, and I think probably Mary Lou would be the person to answer that after we're done with the traffic engineer, or Chris Kowalski.
We can wrap that up tonight.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Do we want to?
You can do it now.
You want to do it now? Yeah, you want to come up, Mary Lou? Because I meant to ask you, and I totally forgot. I meant to ask you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There was a couple questions
There's a
that
couple properties.
Mr. Harris wasn't aware of.
Yeah,
and-
right.
And
Mary Lou, just going back, you're recalled, you're still under oath. There was a couple questions regarding what happens when certain buildings are reconverted to other uses. One was Austin Hall, I believe.
Yes, so Austin Hall right now is a residence hall, and the lower level, it's a very small building. I don't think it's more than 30,000 square feet, the entire building. So, and it's 3 floors. I believe that it will go back to being, we'll use some of the space as it was originally, which is lounge space for the residence halls, and we don't have any plans for the other part of it. It's not fantastic space. It's really, low ceilings and stuff like that. So we don't have plans for it at this time. So I would see it being more used for residents.
And then there was a question regarding the current bookstore in St. Mary's.
We also don't have any plans for that. That was in the old chapel. So for now, it will probably be, whether it's going to be additional staff that we will have in there, we don't have any plans for it yet. I wish I could tell you that we did, but we don't.
And there was 2 other buildings that were being removed in the CO district, Garrity and Griffin, which
Yes.
are office buildings now.
They are the offices for our communications department, and there are 40 staff members in that department. However, I would say probably 75% work remotely now. When COVID happened, they stopped coming into these offices and started working remotely and found that we could continue to do that. Those that will still be coming in, we are going to relocate to TSB, which is further west. It's that building that used to be our IT building, and our IT folks have moved out of that and are in Albin 1 and 2, which are now Kennedy Hall and Riley Hall. So that is a fairly vacant building right there now, and we would use that for moving whoever it remains on campus from Garrity and Griffin into that building.
Okay, John?
No, that answers the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth and whole truth?
I do.
State your full name, please, and spell it.
Frank Tavani, F-R-A-N-K-T-A-V-A-N-I.
And Frank, what is your profession?
I'm a traffic engineer.
And I have marked as A15 your CV.
Yes, you have.
And what's your background in traffic engineering?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, graduated May 1993. I've been in continuous practice as a traffic engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania ever since. I hold a PE license, which was issued in 1999, also a PTOE certification, which was issued some years later, and I've been self-employed for the last 21 years.
And have you previously been qualified as an expert before this township and other townships as an expert on traffic engineering?
I have.
Any objection to his qualifications?
No, I'm familiar with Mr. Tavani. No objections to him being qualified.
Frank, how long have you done traffic studies for Villanova?
Since late 2004.
And did you do traffic study for this particular project?
Yes.
And was the study performed under the guidance of the township's traffic consultants?
It was.
And this project, it borders Lancaster Avenue?
Yes.
And what type of road is Lancaster?
That's a major arterial.
I have marked as A16 the full traffic report and handed it up. Is that the report that you performed?
Yes.
And what was your methodology on that report?
So A16 is 212 pages, contains 8 pages of text, 17 pages of figures, and the remainder being support material. I'm not going to go through all of those pages, obviously, but I will just hit a couple of the highlights. As the council just pointed out, the first thing I did was I consulted with the township traffic engineer to agree on a scope and the intersections to be studied, as well as how to handle the trip generation component of this project, which is somewhat unique. You heard from earlier witnesses about how the Welcome Center currently operates. One of my first thoughts when I heard this project is, well, if the Welcome Center currently exists, as does the bookstore, does changing the Welcome Center or bookstore really result in added traffic? You know, in and of itself, it's not going to change the number of applicants. So my initial reaction was really that there would be no increase in traffic. This whole project is about this touch point when student prospects and their families sometimes first encounter the campus. And as we heard from earlier witnesses, the current Welcome Center is perhaps not ideally located and not up to date. So this is really an attempt to modernize the facilities and also, ironically, to reduce some traffic. Presently, parents arrive with their children or child and park in L2, which I'm looking on the screen right now on A3A. L2 is the majority of the parking on this screen. It's not only parking between the right in, right out driveway on the left and St. Thomas Way, it actually extends beyond to the west, to the left of the right in, right out driveway. That's all L2, and that's where they're told they can park. There's also the L3 parking lot, which is going to be essentially removed entirely because of the project, and that is the small parking lot between St. Thomas Way and the pedestrian overpass. Nevertheless, I did want to arrive at some trip generation, and after learning more about how the information sessions and tours operate today, which as mentioned on page 2 of A16 is very seasonal. And this was touched on by the first witness, but I just want to amplify that testimony a little bit. Most of this activity is really between President's Day and mid-April. That's really when students are making decisions, visiting campuses. This is not the sort of facility that generates traffic day in, day out, like it's like a residential development or a warehouse. It's a very seasonal traffic generator. It's really limited to a handful of weeks in the spring, and then an even shorter time period in the early fall. And that's when you might have as many as 300, but most often it's really a maximum of around 200 visitors, even during those peak times. During the off-peak times, which could amount to 9 months out of the year, you might have double-digit visitors. And that's the number of people visiting. And another very unusual and interesting component of this project, and I'll just skip ahead to page 3 if the board has their copy of A16 available, is the applicant keeps track of not only the number of people who register for these tours, which sometimes are done more than a month in advance, but they also keep track of the number of families and individuals who arrive. And in doing so, you can calculate a vehicular occupancy ratio, or VOR, that will allow you to convert people to actual cars and therefore trips, or trip generation. And as you can see, for example, on table 1 of page 3 of A16, I decided to focus my data collection on Tuesday, February 18th, which is highlighted in yellow. And that's because that's the day after President's Day this year. This is the peak season. We knew that the number of guests that were registered, which is shown in the right column in parentheses, was around 208, which is, again, the typical maximum, even though there's a handful of times when it's higher than that, but typically that's about the maximum. And then their records are so meticulous that they keep track of not only who registered, but who actually showed up, because sometimes things happen and people don't follow through with their plans. And then they can also convert the number of people to number of cars, because some people arrive with 1 parent, some arrive with 2, and invariably what they find is, on average, you have a vehicular occupancy of about 2.5, which means that if you're adding 100, for example, additional visitors, that's only 40 additional cars. And I just want to really drive that point home, no pun intended, because you hear a number like 300, and that's the first thing you think of. It's all, we're talking about 300 cars. But there's really the existing component that's already there. So it's the delta, in my opinion, between what the maximum capacity of this informational meeting room that's proposed can support versus the informational meeting room that's used today elsewhere on campus that is typically maxed out at around 200. So in the interest of time, I know I'm jumping around a bit, but that really is an important point to drive home. Anyway, after talking with the township traffic engineer, we identified 7 intersections, and we also talked about what peak hours that we should study. So I'm sure the board is aware, typically traffic engineers focus on weekday commuter peak hours. This, as we heard from the first witness, is a sort of a different animal, and these information sessions and the following tours are intentionally scheduled only twice a day and purposely have start times that allow people to avoid traveling during peaks. It's not only easier for the school to manage, but it's probably a better experience for the arriving student prospects as well. So with the first tour being at 10:45, and if an information session is offered, which is only on busy days, that starts a half hour earlier at 10:15. You can reasonably state that most people will arrive in the 60-minute window preceding that start point. So you're looking at a first peak hour of maybe 9:15 to 10:15. And then you can continue with that theory to go through when the dismissal peak is and when the afternoon peaks are. And that's all shown on page 2. So I went over all this with the township traffic engineer, and I said, you know, I have 4 peak hours here, start at 9:15, 11:45. What do you want me to study? And he got back to me and he said, I want you to study the AM commuter peak hour, the PM commuter peak hour, and the AM tour arrival peak hour, and the PM tour arrival peak hour. This is all spelled out on page 3 of A16. So I was a little surprised. I said, why am I studying the AM commuter peak hour when we know that we're not going to have anyone arriving during that peak hour? And he said, well, what about additional staff? And I said, well, there's really no, as we heard from other witnesses, there really is no intention to hire any additional staff at this time. In fact, some of the staff aren't even going to be relocated from their existing location to this building. They're going to be sent elsewhere. But nevertheless, we recognize that there may be added staff over time, could be 5, could be 10. So I selected 10 to be conservative. I discussed that with him, we agreed, and we also agreed to place that full burden during the AM commuter peak hour, so all 10 hypothetical employees would arrive during that hour and then leave during the PM commuter peak hour. And then everything else was just based on the tour trip generation using the vehicular occupancy ratio that I touched on earlier. So I know this is rather dry information, and the long and short of it is, if you go to page 11, which has a level of service summary comparison table matrix, I start with the westernmost intersection that I analyzed, being Lancaster Avenue and Villanova Center Drive, and it goes west to east from top to bottom and ends up at Lancaster and Lowry's Lane. And we have 4 peak hours that were analyzed. They're all color-coded. And within each of those 4 subsets, you have a left column and a right column. And the convention I've used for the last 21 years is, if the level of service is not forecasted to change between now and then, or existing in future, I just put a dash just to make it easier and not be overwhelmed with all these numbers. So if you look very quickly at page 11 of A16, you see a lot of dashes. And that simply means that there's not a lot of even measurable impact at various locations and at various turning movements. There's only a handful of locations, in fact, where there's any measurable difference, and in most of those cases, it's like 1 or 2 additional seconds of delay, and that is assuming the full capacity of the full increase of 200 to 300, which again only occurs maybe 20% of the year, if that, and during all other times, this entire page would probably be nothing but dashes, because there would be probably no level of service impact. Another thing that A16 includes is a parking analysis. And as we heard from earlier witnesses, some of the parking analysis done by others looked at the code and sort of the campus in its entirety. So I decided, let's take a belt and suspenders approach and supplement that with my own parking analysis that's based on the interpretation of the plans, as well as ITE parking generation suggestions. And on page 6 of A16, near the bottom, there's a formula of sorts that explains all these different moving pieces that are happening here. So, for example, we're losing all of L3 parking. We're losing some parking in L2 near Moriarty because of the building footprint. So that's effectively added demand. If you take away parking spaces, it's kind of the inverse of adding demand. So that's a positive term in the formula. Conversely, there's some other things that are also happening here. Like, for example, Griffin and Garrity are going away. So that means the parking associated with Griffin and Garrity are going away. And also the parking associated with Moriarty is going away. So that's a negative term. That's a credit, if you will. And at the end of the day, how all the math works out is this project, in my opinion, is going to result in an added parking burden, at worst, of 52 additional spaces demanded. So then the question becomes, well, do we have 52 spaces available? And not even necessarily on campus, but there. Do we have 52 spaces available on A3A? And if you look at page 7 of A16, you'll see a parking summary table based on my personal observations made on the same day as the traffic counts, the day after President's Day, where I observed only empty parking spaces in L2, L3, and even that little SEPTA lot, which isn't really us, but I was in the area anyway, basically all day long. And I even separated L2 into L2 East and L2 West, which in my vernacular, which was east of the right-in, right-out driveway, i.e. most convenient to the proposed new building, and those spaces west of the right-in, right-out driveway. And you'll see that the third row is highlighted in yellow. At 11 o'clock, that was the busiest time, when there were 105 empty parking spaces just in those lots, or basically more than double what the added parking demand could be if this project were approved. So in my opinion, there's certainly not any parking problem associated with the project. And what I just discovered today, this was kind of exciting for me, is if you look at column, the row rather, at 1:15 and at 2 o'clock, you'll see that under L3 and L2, the number of empty spaces, decreases. So people had left, and then some other people had arrived and started filling up those parking spaces. That happens to be right before the afternoon information session, which starts at 2:15. So I had hypothesized that in the 1 hour preceding that 2:15 start time, you have a certain number of people arriving. We know the vehicular occupancy ratio. So anyway, if you do the math, there's a loss of 46 empty parking spaces, 167 minus 121. If you do the math, that really very closely ties in to the 200 students that were registered to visit that day, applying the vehicular occupancy ratio. So it was a good back check. These lots, incidentally, are obviously not just solely reserved for the use of these student and parent prospects. They're also used by not only staff, but there's some activity going on campus right now, some contractor activity, and they need a place to park. And they've been told to park in these lots. And you could actually identify them with hang tags and just the vehicle types. They were sort of all clustered together near the right in, right out driveway. My point being that they were present during these parking counts. So even with that added parking burden, there were still over 100 spaces available at any time of the day during one of the days known to be the busiest time for the Welcome Center presently. So I know that was a little scattershot, but I think I covered most of what I hoped to deliver.
Frank, there was one question asked earlier. A question asked earlier this evening regarding a left turn lane heading west on Lancaster at St. Thomas. Is there a left turn looking at A3A?
Yeah, you can actually see it. So there's 3 Route 30 route symbols, more or less in the middle of the screen, going from left to right. The rightmost one is actually immediately adjacent to the left turn arrow, which is in the westbound direction on Lancaster Avenue. So that serves inbound left turning traffic. And what you can't appreciate in A3A is that is a signalized intersection. So that affords some ease for traffic heading northbound, which you really can't make it out very well. But that's a 2-lane approach northbound. So you have 3-lane approaches east and west. You have 2 throughs and an exclusive right eastbound, and then 2 throughs and an exclusive left westbound, and then 2 lanes northbound. This intersection is one of the best performing intersections surrounding the campus. I mean, it's level of service A, has enormous reserve capacity. And it's more or less coincidental that the project is being placed here, but really couldn't pick a better location in some respect from a traffic capacity standpoint.
And looking at that western entrance there, is there a benefit to having it at that location further west as far as how people generally arrive onto campus?
Well, I think as we heard accurately from other witnesses, some people will be arriving by way of the Blue Route or I-476, which is west or to the left. And as they're arriving, they will invariably, if they're familiar with campus and probably have good directions in advance, will use that as an entrance movement. But then when they leave to return, they'll use the traffic signal at St. Thomas to make the exiting left turn corollary movement.
Within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, did you reach a conclusion as to the traffic impact resulting from the development?
Yes.
And what was that conclusion?
That it is minimal.
Did you also reach a conclusion within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty regarding parking impacts by this development?
Yes.
And what was that conclusion?
The parking needs are addressed.
I'm sorry.
The parking needs are addressed.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Mr. Tavani, how many traffic studies have you done for Villanova?
Maybe 2 dozen.
2 dozen.
It's a guess, but probably.
All in Radnor Township, I take it?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever found in any of those traffic studies that Villanova's project was going to cause a traffic hazard or the parking was insufficient?
I can't recall as to parking. Parking is a sort of a supplement that I do as needed or as may be helpful. But with regard to traffic, I don't think I've ever found that a project had a meaningful detrimental impact.
So even though Villanova keeps building, and increasing, there's no impacts to any of the intersections sufficient that would warrant any type of an improvement under your study, correct?
Well, I mean, yes and no, because in this juncture, there isn't, and that's partly because over the years, Villanova has made contributions to the traffic network in the area. For example, this signalized intersection that I was just discussing at St. Thomas Way, if I recall correctly, when this was basically a sea of macadam in one large parking lot, I believe that was signalized, but I'm not so certain that those auxiliary turning lanes were present. I think it was just 2 lanes in each direction. The right-in, right-out driveway, for example, which I have to credit the township, as I recall from the better part of 10 years ago, that was actually part of a collective discussion with township staff. There were a number of driveways that were along the south side of Lancaster Avenue that were all closed and consolidated, and that reduces the number of potential conflicts and just gives an overall smoother operation. So perhaps part of the reason why, as time goes by and projects come along, some of the impact is blunted is for the very reason that Villanova has made some changes over the years that have improved traffic in the area.
Because they've done fairly significant land developments, that's required, right?
I really can't recall if these were so much required as much as a contribution, understanding that, Villanova wants to be a good neighbor, and we're all part of the same plan here, whether it's a municipality, an applicant, everybody wants traffic to work. So I honestly cannot recall from job number 211027, which was when I did all this, if these improvements were explicitly required or if we just recognized, look, this makes sense, we'll do it.
So out of the goodness of their heart, they did all these improvements, not because the land development plan that built the dorms from St. Thomas Way down to Aldwyn, that massive building project, that wasn't the reason for the road improvements, you're saying? Or you don't know?
Well, I mean, I certainly very clearly recall that there was about 1,200 parking spaces in that area, and there was a certain amount of traffic that was generated daily flowing in and out of that area. And I believe I gave the opinion, which was somewhat controversial at the time, that if anything, these students are now currently commuting to campus and they don't live on campus. This was an invitation to bring them on campus to complete their campus experience. So you could argue that there would be a reduction in traffic by virtue of that project. Even though you might describe it as massive, it doesn't mean that there's a massive trip generation component. If anything, I think it resulted in potentially some reduction in traffic.
Right. And that particular project, you didn't render an opinion that it was going to be there was going to be a negative traffic impact when the dorms were built, correct? You never rendered that opinion.
I really came prepared tonight, Counselor, to discuss this application, but I think it's probably safe to say that I agree with you.
Yeah. You mentioned the township engineer several times, and there's I guess an email with a list of intersections that's in your report that you studied. So I want to ask you about the intersections that you studied, because you rendered an opinion that those intersections are going to be negatively impacted by this project. That's your opinion tonight, correct?
Yes, that's not a meaningful impact.
Okay. So, and I think, I didn't hear the most western intersection you studied, but I thought it was Lancaster Avenue and the Villanova Center?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the level of service currently at that intersection?
Well, I'll refer to page 11 of A16. If you're talking the overall level of service, the overall level of service is A, pretty much during all 4 peak hours that were studied.
It's A.
The overall, which is a blend of all the turning movements. So you could cherry pick certain turning movements that have a higher burden, and you could cherry pick those that have a lesser burden, but that is the overall performance.
And level of service at an intersection is really a measure of how long does it take me to get through that intersection in terms of time, correct?
Essentially, there's two components. There's a letter grade, and then there's an estimate of delay in seconds. They're computer generated, and the theory is if you went through this intersection an infinite number of times, that is on average how long you would wait to be processed. Sometimes you wouldn't wait at all. Sometimes if, for example, you're heading east on Route 30 through that and you're approaching that signalized intersection, if it's a green ball on the approach as you're getting there, your delay is zero. You just process.
You're right.
And you have,
Right, you're right.
Conversely, sometimes you might arrive on the tail end of the yellow interval and have to wait for an entire cycle. But if you average it out over an infinite number of times, it's my understanding. I didn't prepare the models, but that's my understanding.
So going east from that intersection, what was the next intersection that you studied?
The big one, the six-legged intersection of Lancaster, Spring Mill, Kenilworth, and Aldwyn.
Okay, and how is that currently operating in terms of the level of service?
Overall, it's mostly E.
E. E. The only thing worse than an E is an F, right?
Yes.
You can't go any lower than an F?
Well, there's different levels of level of service F, but
Right, but the numerical F is the worst.
well, in the alphabetical grade, the F is the worst, and that's where it ends. So there is no G, there is no H, but you could have an F with an 80-second delay. You can have an F with an 800-second delay. So
Right. So that particular intersection is currently operating at an E, and your opinion is that this project is not going to materially impact that level of service, right?
correct, and not to discredit my own abilities, but it's pretty easy to see how that conclusion is reached. As we heard from the first witness, the scheduling of these tours and information sessions are during off-peak periods. And really, the only impact during the busiest times of day, during the commuter peak hours, are these hypothetical additional staff members who are assumed to be essentially 9 to 5 employees. That burden does impact those busy peak hours, but the peak hours relative to the information sessions are off-peak, and by definition, there's just less traffic in a road network during off-peak, so you have better overall performance, and therefore the impact is more blunted when you add new traffic.
Well, you're minimizing what's going to happen there. And isn't there a retail store going to be there, fairly significant, large retail store that's going to be open pretty much 9 to 5, 7 days a week?
I mean, retail is an odd term. You know, I'm not really sure if a campus bookstore really falls under that description. It is going to be open to the public. But as we heard from other witnesses, and as I've seen with my own eyes at the existing bookstore in St. Mary's, it's essentially, you know, a clothing store that also sells, in some limited capacity, you know, things like soda and snacks and of course books. But really, it's basically it's a touch point for visitors to get some Villanova gear. I don't even know how much existing students really patronize it more than a few times a year, save for when they want a snack.
Cavani, I understand what a retail bookstore is, but my question is, did you consider the operation of the retail bookstore when you did your traffic report?
Yeah, it was very carefully considered, yes.
Okay. And you understand it'll be open probably 7 days a week, right?
The existing bookstore is open 6 days a week. It's closed on
6 days a week.
It's closed on Sunday. It's 9 to 5 or 11 to 6 on Saturday.
Okay, so the intersection that you mentioned, you said it's Lancaster, Kenilworth?
Basically, it's referred to as Lancaster and 320 or Lancaster and Spring Mill.
So that intersection, what would have to be done to that intersection to make that a level C or a level B? What kind of improvements would have to be done?
I'm sorry, I don't see the relevancy of this at all. I mean, we've already testified that it's very minimal increase of traffic, if any. It's the same people going back to ask for, you know, a 5.6-point intersection everyone knows is bad and through no fault of Villanova for traffic improvements is really beyond what we're
What's
talking
the
about here.
objection? Relevancy
Relevancy.
or?
Relevancy.
I
Okay.
overruled it.
The answer is I don't know. I didn't explicitly study that, seeing that the impact of the application was minimal. There was no reason to investigate improvements.
Yeah, but that wasn't my question. My question is what would have to be done to raise that from an E to a D or a C? What would have to be done to that intersection?
I understand your question, and maybe the interruption made my answer unclear. The answer is I don't know. I did not investigate that, so I cannot give you a good answer. I didn't investigate it because it was not necessary as part of my study.
Mr. Tavani, you're an expert traffic engineer. You should be able to look at that and identify it needs a turning lane. It needs curbing. You didn't do that?
Well, I appreciate the characterization. I like to think of myself as qualified, but I really don't want to give you an answer that hasn't been tested and vetted. There are a number of existing turning lanes at that intersection, and there are many possibilities for what could improve it, and one has to also consider feasibility and constructability, and I just simply haven't done that yet. I have some answers, but I don't have all the answers.
So you don't have an opinion how to improve that intersection?
I'm going to renew my objection. This is not relevant to anything we're discussing here tonight.
Just to respond to that, if this board decides to grant relief, special exception, you have the right to attach conditions. And some of those conditions might be improvements to the road system based on what you've heard. And that's the reason I'm asking Mr. Tavani. He studied the intersections. And I'm going to ask him about the other 5 and see if he, has an opinion whether or not they can be improved, because anyone that goes through any of those intersections knows that they need to be improved. So,
I'll overrule the objection. I just want to say this. We're not, we are a quasi-judicial body, but we're not bound strictly by the rules of evidence, but
Right.
It only seems fair to me that counsel should have the opportunity to cross-examine this expert on his conclusions. We don't have a jury here in the sense that we have to protect the jury from hearing things they shouldn't be hearing. Not that this is off the charts, but I think it's appropriate to have cross-examination.
thank you. Mr. Tavani, let's go to the next intersection east. After the level E one, what's the next intersection you studied?
So technically, it's the right-in, right-out driveway on the left side of A3A. This is an unsignalized intersection which only permits right-ins and right-out, right-in from the west and northbound, outbound right-turn movements.
And how was that intersection?
Pretty good. Level of service B.
B?
B as in boy.
And there is no left turn lane going in there, however, is there, as I'm going west? I can't, if I want to make a left into there, right? There's no left turn lane?
That's correct. I think what we decided was the left turns into L2, L3, et cetera, would be accommodated at St. Thomas Way, so it was probably superfluous to have that movement at the right-in, right-out driveway as well.
Because they're so close together also, would that?
I don't know if I would say that, but the left turn volume, I think the thought when this was designed, which again was not part of this application, was the westbound left turning movements, this is for entering left turning traffic, could likely be accommodated at St. Thomas Way. And we sort of have this reverse frontage road that parallels the railroad line that connects all these parking lots anyway, and it's working out pretty well.
Is St. Thomas Way the next intersection you studied?
Yes.
And what's that operating at?
A.
And going east, Aldwin and Lancaster, would that be the next one? No, Ithan, I'm sorry. Going east, what would be, is it Ithan and Lancaster?
Yes.
And what's that operating at now?
Depending on the peak hour in question, either B or C is the overall rating.
Okay. And you have an opinion as to what could be done to that intersection to make it a B or an A?
I do not.
Okay, let's keep going east. What was the next intersection that you were studying?
The last intersection along the Lancaster Avenue corridor was Lancaster and Lowry's, another signalized intersection.
And you studied it, but do you have an opinion? What's the level of service right now on it?
The overall is A during all 4 peak hours.
Okay. So the one intersection that there's an issue with is the one that you identified as operating at a level E, but you've opined that there's no need to do anything about it, correct?
Relative to this application, yes.
You testified, and it wasn't clear to me, because you ran through your testimony, but you identified 10 employees at the Welcome Center, is that right?
Just looking for the exact page for purposes of record. So the first paragraph under the section trip generation, which is page 4 of A16 toward the end, there's a sentence that reads, while no new staff are planned to be hired as part of this project, it is possible that 5 to 10 new staff members could be added over time, and, to be conservative, a number of 10 new staff in the proposed building was incorporated into site traffic projections.
Okay. So Mr. Harris testified that his 26 or 27 employees were going to move to the Welcome Center. I think you were here tonight. Did you hear that testimony?
I did, and I believe the new Welcome Center is over 2 floors, and I believe on the second story in the upper right, as I recall, I think that there was area for 15 or 16 staff members, and I think that he mentioned that they would go there. And then on the bottom floor, I think there was another area really more for a different type of admin staff. I'm not sure if it was clear how many would be in that location, but he did opine there were 26 or 27, including 4 who basically don't report to campus save for a handful of times a year. And I think he also indicated that even after accounting for them, there might still be a few people not necessarily moving into this building, either because they're working remotely or perhaps stationed elsewhere. The majority will be here, though.
Right. But you were wrong. It's not going to be 10. It's going to be 26 or 27, correct?
I don't recall saying 10. I said that in the second floor of the new building in the upper right, I think you can fit about 15. And I think on the first floor in the lower left corner, there was also some area for office or admin or personnel. And I don't know if that number was ever clarified. But I think that there were something in the low 20s, it sounded like, is either a starting point of either 26 or 27, minus the 4 that don't come to campus at all. So now we're down to 22 or 23. 15 accommodated in the upper right on the top floor. Sounds like about 20 are going into this building. I'm sure Mr. Harris would be happy to clarify that if he's recalled.
All right, just so we're clear, you agree that there's going to be 26 or so employees moving from the current admissions office, okay? Just yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there going to be another 10 additional employees beyond that?
There are no plans for that, but I did incorporate, to be conservative, 10 hypothetical added staff, which could be related to the bookstore, could be related to Mr. Harris's
In
person.
addition to the 26?
Yes.
Okay. The parking analysis you did on one day, February 18th, I believe you testified, at least as part of that, did you personally observe the parking, the existing traffic conditions on page 2 of your report? You talk about the count date was Tuesday, the 18th of February, 2025. And then you have a table of tour guests, and you were counting empty parking spots. Did you do that yourself?
I did. It was a high caloric activity day for me.
So from like 10 until 3, you were there all day?
There were times, since I did it approximately every half hour, sometimes every hour, as table 2 on page 7 of A16 shows, there were times where I may have briefly left, either to use a restroom, something of that ilk. But for the most part, I was there during the majority of that time period, walking.
And on page 5 of your projected traffic conditions, you reference Appendix D, which is the PennDOT information for background growth. That's background traffic growth, right?
Yes.
And they've estimated for Delaware County, it's 0% per year?
Yeah, it's been that way for years, actually.
It's not specific to Radnor Township, though, is it?
No, the tables that PennDOT provides annually, they come out right around now, actually, are for each of the 126 counties in the Commonwealth, but they don't, it gets no more granular than that.
And then your report says, since it's 0% as reported by PennDOT, there's no other development traffic to include in this study other than Villanova's own projects. So when you did your study, you utilized this project and the other Villanova projects, but nothing else that was going on in Radnor Township, correct?
Correct.
Did you contact anybody at the township building here and say, hey, are there any large projects under construction in the township in close proximity to this project?
I believe I did discuss that with the township traffic engineer, but
Well, you did or you didn't? Do you remember what day you discussed that with him?
I don't.
Okay. Did you send him an email regarding other projects at all?
No.
Okay. And you didn't get any information from Radnor Township regarding other projects like condominium projects or other residential projects that are under review or under construction, did you?
I'm not aware of any in this immediate area, no.
Since you didn't get them, you didn't include any of that in this report, correct?
Correct.
Are you aware of other Villanova projects that are going to occur in the next 5 years?
No.
So no other Villanova building projects that would require your services, as far as you know?
As far as I know.
In your, on page 8 of your report, so you say that you included the effects of other recent ongoing projects, namely the new library and the HSB park and garage expansion project. So there's nothing beyond that that you're aware of, correct?
Yes.
How about any projects that Villanova's might be proposing on the old Cabrini campus? Are you aware of any projects there, building projects?
I'm aware generally that something may happen, but I don't really know the specifics about what's happening there.
Generally, a building project you're aware of?
Well, I know that they acquired it, and I know they're going to repurpose it, but I'm not really sure how.
Okay. In your report, on February 18th, let me just ask you about that date, because how was the weather that date? Do you remember? Was there any winter weather on that date that might have closed roads or caused issues in the township?
So at the bottom of page 2 of A16, the very last line begins, the selected count date was Tuesday, 18 February 25, which was a normal school day, having ordinary class schedule and not affected by detours, holidays, or other traffic anomalies. I do recall it being a little cold, but since I was out that day making the parking observations, I don't recall any precipitation events. I specifically chose Tuesday as opposed to Monday because conveniently, as you can see in Table 1, page 3 of A16, that happened to be a marginally higher day in terms of registered guests for the sessions. And it was also a day that Villanova had its normal classes in effect. The day before, being President's Day, there might have been some class cancellations. So all things considered, I chose Tuesday because it was sort of like a double whammy. You had the busier information sessions and tours, plus normal campus activities. So I believe it to be a conservative date, and I don't recall any weather anomalies.
Hey, Mr. Tavani, we heard some testimony earlier about the number of visitors that come for tours on the site, with an estimate of about 13,000 people come for tours. Did you consider that number of people when you prepared your traffic study? Did you have that information when you prepared your traffic study?
I did not. Interestingly, if you take the 26,000 applicants and the 12 or 13,000 number, and then you divide that by 200, because that's the theoretical maximum that occurs today, that works out to about 60 days over the course of the year that you could have as many as 200 students. So that's about 2 months out of 12. And as I testified during my direct, I said the busiest times of year happen to be President's Day to mid-April, and also the early part of the fall, which covers about 2 or 3 months. So it actually seems to dovetail pretty nicely with that number. But actually, no, I didn't have that number in my pocket while I prepared A16.
And got a question about your parking count. So on the last page of your report, and I'm not sure about the last paragraph. You asked the question, is there an effective surplus of at least 52 parking
Excuse me, John.
spaces?
John, please use the microphone.
Sorry.
Move it over.
Yeah, I got to get it closer. Sorry about that. You talk about a surplus of 52 parking spaces during peak hours. And are you saying that there's 52 more available parking spaces in those lots during those peak hours? Did you look at all at the zoning parking requirements for the building? I mean, how does that reflect what's required under the zoning ordinance, is my question.
It doesn't. As that was being addressed by others on the team, I decided to take, I think the term I used during my direct was a belt and suspenders approach, where I applied my own approach to study this and look at real world demand, look at other ways to calculate the forecasted additional demand, and then just see whether or not we had it available in the most convenient locations. And I believe we do.
But you'd agree that some of the parking, and it looks like 50 spaces that's required for this project, are not being provided on this particular lot. They're being provided by looking at the campus as a whole.
That's
whole,
not
correct?
an accurate representation of the testimony presented.
You can answer the question.
I did not look on a per lot basis. I just looked at what we can essentially see on A3A. It's a little bit more to the left. L2 continues slightly to the left, which I also included in my survey, but not very far.
Okay. I don't have any other questions for Mr. Tavani.
Just a very quick redirect. Frank, in the 21 years you've been doing these studies for Villanova, has the student population increased?
I really don't know.
And you did the parking study for the Commons area, the new dormitories right next to this project. Did you do the parking study for that?
It's not ringing a bell at the moment.
The Commons.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
2011. That was
Right,
a big
yeah.
part of my life in those 2
Right.
years.
And is it your opinion that bringing those students on campus would reduce the amount of commuter traffic to campus?
That was the opinion I offered in 2011 and 2012, yes.
Were you requested by the township consultants to prepare any recommendation for the intersections mentioned by Mr. Rice?
No.
That's all I have.
Nothing else?
I have two quick questions. Previously, Mr. Harris testified that the actual events, the large volume of people coming in, were not always set by time due to student schedules causing some shifts in time. Did you account for any of the shifts in time, you know, maybe 15 minutes before, 15 minutes after, or was it just the scheduled time?
I may have misunderstood Mr. Harris's testimony, but I think I believe what he was explaining is, I think they decide, these events are planned weeks, sometimes over a month in advance, and I think they look at calendars and availability of these, you know, student ambassadors and determine whether or not, okay, we can accept this many people on this day, or we need to shift it to a different day. That's my understanding.
So, I mean, I can ask Mr. Harris this if that's more appropriate, but from what I remember, it was a shifting of times to accommodate in student schedules. So I just want to know, was there any accounting for any shifting in time, or were you only focused on the exact periods of time set forth by Mr. Harris?
I focus basically the second part.
Okay.
We have a 10:45 start for the tour, 10:15 for the information session. I focused on the 60-minute period prior to that start.
Okay. Also, second question. You referred to starting to work for Villanova, what was it, 24 years ago? 21 years ago was the first time you worked for them?
2004.
All right, so 21 years ago. How many projects did you do with them again?
I'm just guessing it's maybe 24, but it's kind of
So what percent of your business would be Villanova?
That's a good question. You know, I'm not that sophisticated, but they're a valued client for sure. FTA, my firm typically books about 28 or 30 jobs per year. So I'm like about 700 jobs floating around in my head at this point. If I was accurate in my estimation of about 24 jobs over the last 21 years, you know, it's about 1 or 2 jobs per year. So it's a relatively small percentage of my overall job activity, but still an important client.
What are some of your other clients, if you don't mind? Are there institutional players? Is it small businesses?
I've been fortunate to have a lot of institutional clients. Lower Merion School District was an early client, and I still do work for them even to this day. Westchester Area School District is very...
Have you ever delivered bad news to them?
Well, I guess it depends how you clarify bad news.
I think we're at the limit here on the questioning.
I've got no questions.
Yes, I move the exhibits in the record, please. I believe that is A1 through A25.
Without objection?
No objection.
And John, do you have any exhibits to move in?
No, no exhibits.
Thank you. One thing that we deferred until all the testimony was in and the exhibits have been moved into evidence is public comment. So is there any public comment? If so, raise your hand. Please come on up, be sworn in, and identify yourself.
I do. Sarah, S-A-R-A, and the last name is Pilling, P-I-L-L-I-N-G. It's more of an observation than a question. I live east of Lowry's Lane on Garrett Avenue. I'm retired. My supermarket is west of Villanova. And I have sat through as many as 5 cycles trying to get past from Ithan Avenue past 320. And that's because you have change of classes, you have other cars. Sometimes it is absolutely impossible. The net result is Conestoga's becoming very busy because we're avoiding Lancaster Avenue. It's not a free breeze to get through. That's all I wanted to say.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we've already announced that we're going to give our decision on the meeting in July 26th. That'll be a public, June 26th, I'm sorry, June 26th, at the regular meeting at that time. And then we will ask council to provide any supplemental briefing on the subject within 7 days after getting the transcript.
That's fine.
Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, very good. And we're looking forward to getting the transcript.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I have a couple questions I'd like to pose to council before we
Sure.
wrap tonight, if I can.
Okay, go ahead.
So, Nick, it's your application. I'll start with you. I'd like to hear your comment on the side yard setback.
Right.
And the issues that.
And that's going to be addressed.
I understand the.
It's the merger, and that's why we're getting in. This is an integrated campus. Everything is merged. There must be an overt act to merge.
I understand
and there's
that,
case law
and I
on
don't mean
that.
to cut
So
you
that's where
off,
we're going,
but
okay?
That's not what I'm asking you. I'd like you to comment on whether or not, as a board, we have to honor the distinction between these two zoning districts or not.
The distinction on the zoning districts don't matter. It's measured from a property line. So the distinction, you don't measure the setback from the zoning district. It's measured from a property line. Mr. Rice contends that the property lines, basically on the zoning district, our position is there is no property line there. It has been merged. And so therefore, there is no side yard requirement, or there is a side yard requirement, but it's several hundred feet away.
So do we know if St. Thomas Way is that a publicly open street? I guess
No,
the
that's
way
the
to-
private, yes,
Private
Villanova,
street.
yeah. And actually Villanova owns to the middle of all the streets, to Ithan, Lancaster. So they own basically both sides, and you have a right-of-way going through.
Council, do you want to respond to that question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Their plans show property lines. Their own plans show St. Thomas right-of-way. It shows a property line over here, and then that's the PI. And this is the CO. And if you go to the other end of the CO, which Nick referenced, there's a side yard there. They talked about it. One of the witnesses talked about side yard on the other end of that. Our contention is that is one big lot. They consolidated. It's a lot. You have to have front yards, side yards, and rear yards if you have a lot. This testimony about, oh, it's an integrated campus, we treat it all as one, that's great. But that's not zoning. That's what they do when they do their plans. That is not a zoning ordinance concept. It's not in the code. They don't have a side yard lot. They're building right through it.
Respectfully have to disagree, and I'll hand up the cases on the merger that I have here. And actually, I do have one case, which is actually a good discussion on merger that I'll, and the reason I'm handing this case up is it talks about the merger, and it talks about an overt act by the applicant to combine the lots, which was done in this case. So I'll hand that up now, but I'll also go to do a memo on it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rice, I have another question for you. In your memorandum of law that you submitted, there's argument that deals with, and I don't know where in the memo it sits, but you talk about the idea that the fact that Moriarty Hall is going to be removed or demolished. And what I'd like to understand is what's the significance of that, in your opinion, with respect to the nonconformity versus the expansion? I think it all sort of ties together.
Yeah, here's the problem with the application, and it's in the memo, and I'll reiterate based on the testimony, is that the township zoning ordinance has two provisions that deal with nonconforming uses that are part of Villanova's application. One of them says that you can change from one nonconforming use to another nonconforming use, period, which is what they're doing. Fine. We're not contesting that the dormitory is a nonconforming use and they want to put a retail, they're only saying retail, non-conforming use. And if that's all they were doing, and if they were going to change Moriarty Hall to a retail use, they could expand that 50%. But the second provision.
But are you saying they can't demolish Moriarty Hall and build 50% larger?
Correct. Because,
Why not? Why
because
not?
the second special exception deals with the 50%, okay? And let me just get to the operative language in the code. Because nonconforming uses, remember, they're created when you're operating a use and a zoning ordinance gets passed, which makes it no longer a permitted use in the zoning district it's in. So if I'm operating a flower shop and the township passes a zoning ordinance and it's permitted under the old zoning, township passes a new zoning ordinance which says you can't have flower shops anymore in there. Now it's a non-conforming use. That's how they get created. The only non-conforming use that's in the facts, is Moriarty Hall, because it's in the CO. They cannot, and they can change that, Moriarty Hall, to some other non-conforming use, but that's not really what they're doing. They're putting, these two provisions are self-exclusive. They're not.
That's my next question for you.
Yeah.
But what's the problem with the demolition? That's what I'm not following.
With the demolition?
Right. I took your argument out of your memo to read that it's the demolition that's really the heart of the problem for them.
No, the heart of the problem is that they're trying to not only change from one non-conforming use to another, which is permissible, we agree, but then they're also trying to take advantage of the next section, which says you get 50% expansion, which only an existing non-conforming use gets 50% expansion, not one that they're creating tomorrow.
So your argument is then that we can't read these sections as successive.
Correct.
Why not?
Well, because when I read 280-101, the first paragraph in the ordinance says the following regulations shall apply to existing non-conforming to existing lawful buildings, lots, and uses which do not conform to the provisions of this chapter. So the only existing is Moriarty Hall. Welcome Center is not existing. It's part of their master plan, so they get, and the law of non-conforming uses in the state are designed to protect existing non-conforming uses. And then some ordinances, like Radnor says, you can continue to do that, and we'll let you do 50% of that existing non-conforming use. That's not what they're doing. They're changing it, and they're adding 50% on top of it. Those two provisions, A1 and A2, cannot be done together because you have to have an existing non-conforming use. That is the only use which can be expanded by 50%, not creating a new non-conforming use and then adding 50%. And to take my argument a further step is they're taking one non-conforming use, a dormitory, and they're putting in a retail and an institutional use. So they're putting two when they can only get one. And I think it's a big bite. Looks like a beautiful project, doesn't comply with zoning. The way this code reads. So you have my memo. I think I laid it out in there. I'll update it. I think, Chairman, you said we have 7 days.
7 days after the transcript is delivered.
After the transcripts, okay. She's fast.
Nick, do you want to address that?
Yes, just one thing on the removal of the building. This was addressed. This was addressed by the courts, and the money decision actually was addressed by the courts. And granted, it was an unreported decision, but you still can look at it for basis in the Wawa decision. That was a recent decision from the Commonwealth Court, that you can remove a nonconforming use and replace it with a nonconforming use. As the case is mentioned here, the money case.
Meaning a new structure.
Being a new structure. And in this instance, it refers to first, and of course it's an existing nonconforming use. It has to be existing to replace it with another nonconforming use. But then you can expand that. To provide otherwise would mean that Villanova could build this building, the same square footage, and then come in with another application asking for a 50% increase, and it would be complied with. They would comply with the ordinance. So it doesn't make logical sense to say that you have to do that before you can add the 50% onto it. So, again, both of us will brief it. I think it's pretty clear that we can add it to another nonconforming use. The case law is clear on it. I think we're in a strong position here, and we've granted the items for special exception. We're talking about a special exception here. Burden's on the opponent, when you talk about a special exception, once the specific requirements are met, which we've met.
And I think it's clear that the ordinance clearly says that these regulations apply to existing nonconforming uses. Under this ordinance, there's been no changes in this ordinance since 1970. I mean, if we did a zoning map amendment tomorrow, then he'd have an argument that he could do that. But this sort of freezes what's non-conforming. When this ordinance was passed, that freezes it, in my view.
And this is the problem with the ordinance, that I think it's a 1968 ordinance. John and I have talked about this. It's the problem with the ordinance.
Okay,
That's the
we're
rabbit
in
hole.
22, so I think it's.
And I just
more
wanted to say that the
questions, Mr.
ordinance
Chairman.
doesn't prohibit it. And that's where the case law comes in, that the ordinance has to prohibit it.
One more question for you, Nick. John just raised the concept that it's an institutional use and a retail use. Can you address?
Sure. I mean, it's just like the dormitory is an institutional use. It's an institutional use and it's a dormitory use. In this instance, it is a retail use. It's a university shop. We're not going to say that it's not a retail component. But
How
it
about
is
the Welcome
institutional.
Center?
I'm sorry.
How do you characterize the Welcome Center? The
Welcome Center is an
auditorium?
office use. And actually, the zoning officer even said it was an office use in his letter.
I don't think his letter says that.
I think it does.
That it's an office.
I think.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn? We stand adjourned.